Chapter 1494. The experts from the other worlds were about to break through the world barrier and enter the 10th realm. This news was like a bolt out of the blue to the rogue cultivators in the 10th realm. Originally, they already had very few opportunities under the pressure of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders. Now, they had to compete with the experts from the other worlds. For them, this was undoubtedly a form of despair. But for many people, they also understood that this was the greatest test that rogue cultivators faced in every royal court struggle. The royal court struggle would only last for 3 months. The first month would be the battles in each world, and the rankings would be preliminarily determined. In the second month, the experts who had failed in their respective worlds would enter the other worlds to compete for rankings. For example, the fact that the experts of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders had actually encountered the top experts of the royal families in the 8th realm was irrefutable proof. Then, in the last month, the top 10 experts of each world would enter the first realm to battle. In the end, the winners and losers would be determined, and the top 100 would be selected by the royal court to be groomed. Of course, other than them, there were also some people who were not strong enough but had performed extremely well. They would also be favored by some of the big shots in the royal court and might even be accepted as disciples. Compared to the other worlds, the overall strength of the 10th realm was naturally at the bottom. Who could compete with the geniuses of the Ho and royal families? However, these were all individuals. The overall strength of the rogue cultivators could not be compared to the Ho and royal families. Even if they stood out from the billions of rogue cultivators, they were still inferior when compared to the experts of the Ho and royal families. It was also because of this that the frustrated experts of the other worlds would choose to come to the 10th realm for one last fight. For the many rogue cultivators in the 10th realm, this was no different from a disaster. No matter what they did, they could not struggle out of the encirclement of these experts. The reason why the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders increased the degree of their violent conquest was, on one hand, to suppress all sides and consolidate the rear. This was to prevent any trouble from happening when they used all their strength to deal with the experts from the other worlds. On the other hand, it was to establish a sufficient advantage. As long as the number tags were in their hands, then no matter what the others did, they would not be able to escape. After another 2 days, someone discovered that a fragment of the Great Path had once appeared in the depths of the 10th realm. When this news came out, it immediately caused a stir in the entire 10th realm. The 10th realm was like a wild and undeveloped world. There were many treasures of heaven and earth, but no matter what kind of treasures of heaven and earth, it was impossible to compare with a divine item of the Great Path like a fragment of the Great Path. This was not something that could grow naturally. The Great Tao was hidden in the void, and under normal circumstances, it would not appear at all, let alone be broken into pieces by others. Normally, even if an almighty was able to shatter the laws, they would quickly recover and would not be able to survive. Such a situation could be said to be 1 in a billion. Therefore, when this news came out, although there was no way to verify its authenticity, it immediately caused a sensation in the entire 10th realm. Many experts immediately rushed to the mountain range. If they were able to seize the fragments of the Great Path, then their cultivation would be able to advance a step further. Even those who were previously mediocre would now have the qualifications to compete for the top 10 places. In the face of such temptation, no one could resist. In a valley, Yi Shiwen once again woke up from his closed-door training. His cultivation still hadn't advanced an inch and was still stuck at the peak of the first level of Celestial Being Realm. Last time, he had finally gotten the feeling of breaking through with great difficulty, but it had been interrupted just as he was about to break through. And since then, he had never been able to find that feeling again. At this time, he really understood what it meant by not taking what was given by the heavens, only to suffer misfortune. Sometimes, when an opportunity was placed in front of you, if you did not cherish it, not only would you lose an opportunity, but it would also lead to more serious consequences. After losing that opportunity, Yi Shiwen's cultivation seemed to be stuck by something. He could not improve at all, and was still stuck at the peak of the first level of the celestial realm. For more than a month, there was no progress at all. For him, This was also a great torture. Fortunately, he had the Mingxin ancient tree, which could fix his spirit at any time, so that he would not be anxious and confused. Although he was hiding in this valley, he was not unaware of the storm outside. Great Path Fragment. This kind of heaven and earth divine object, he must get it. If he could devour the Great Path Fragment, then Yi Shiwen's understanding of the realm would undoubtedly have a crazy improvement. As long as his understanding of the realm improved, then improving his strength would undoubtedly be a matter of course. It was like creating a bigger pool. As for filling it with water, it was only a matter of time. Originally, he planned to choose to go out and fight at the end. No matter how fierce they fought before, in the end, it would always fall into the hands of a few people. At that time, he would look for those few people again. Was it not undoubtedly much better than constantly fighting before? It saved time and effort, and he could have more time to break through. As long as he could break into the second level of the celestial realm, then he could sit on the fishing platform and watch the situation change. When he stepped into the second level of the celestial realm, then his combat strength would definitely be comparable to the masters of the fifth level of the celestial realm. Such a master, even in other worlds, should also be a top master, completely qualified to participate in the final fight. It was a pity that until now he could no longer find the feeling of breaking through at that time, and now there was the news of the Great Path Fragment, so he had to come out. Only by devouring the Great Path Fragment can I have a chance to break through again in a short time. Now that things have come to this, there is no other way. Even if it is a dragon's pool or a tiger's den, I have to go. Yi Shiwen muttered to himself. He glanced at the other side of the valley. Qing Luo was sitting cross-legged in closed-door training. There was not the slightest expression on her face, and there was no beautiful smile on her face. There was only that kind of incomparably cold expression. The death of Sun Zisher and Lu Zifan in front of her was a great stimulation for her. It was an unparalleled stimulation. It made her world suddenly become gloomy. Even after being stimulated by Yi Shiwen's words, the only thing left was the belief of continuous hard work. In just a short period of 1 month, the celestial being realm that was originally a little superficial was not only completely consolidated by her, but also rushed to the peak of the first level of celestial being realm. This proved that Yi Shiwen's initial guess was right. Qing Luo did not lack talent, but she lacked temperament in this aspect. She, who was well protected, was like a flower in a greenhouse, completely unable to exert her talent to the extreme. But the death of Sun Zisher and Lu Zifan was a great baptism for her soul, making her soul seem to grow up overnight. Yi Shiwen sighed, but soon he converged his spirit again. There was no ripple in the old well, and it was difficult to move his mind. Qing Luo, I'm going out, Yi Shiwen said. He knew that she could hear him. After all, she was not in closed-door training. And after Qing Luo responded, there was no other sound, and she continued to closed-door training. If I am not here, you should be more vigilant. Although there are layers of arrays outside, if you really feel something is wrong, you should escape first, Yi Shiwen said. And since the words had been spoken, Yi Shiwen no longer said anything more. He immediately took a step into the sky, turned into a stream of light, and disappeared into the sky. As Yi Shiwen got closer to the mountain range, more and more streamers of light appeared in the sky. Many powerful experts also rushed towards this mountain range. Not only the human experts, but also the demon beast experts who were originally hiding in various places of the 10th world. They also rushed towards this mountain range one after another. These demon beast masters had long been psychic. They were very powerful, and their wisdom was not under ordinary people. They could even command the demon beast army to besiege human masters. Humans and beasts were mixed together, but at this time, no one had the mind to care about this. Everyone's thoughts were only to go to the mountain range as soon as possible, otherwise the Great Path fragments might be taken away by others. When Yi Shiwen arrived at this mountain range, just like everyone else who had arrived before him, he had only one kind of feeling, and that was, what kind of nonsense was this? Could it be that he had been fooled? Looking at this barren mountain range, everyone was a bit dumbfounded. Although the mountain range was huge and stretched out for thousands of miles, What kind of cultivation did everyone have? With a sweep of divine thoughts, they could immediately scan at once. But with their powerful divine thoughts, they actually did not find any problems. In other words, this was just a very ordinary mountain range. There was nothing special about it. Then, where is the great path fragment that was found? Everyone was a little dumbfounded. Some of the more impatient even began to shout to kill the person who spread the rumor. They came from thousands of miles away, and the result was only this? Damn it! Not to mention, under these people's search, they actually found the person who said that he saw the great path fragment in the beginning. Under everyone's interrogation, he finally spat out. It turned out that the great path fragment did exist, but it did not always appear here. Instead, it was in another subspace. This subspace would approach the 10th realm every once in a while. At that time, the great path fragment would manifest here. Hearing this, everyone finally stopped being so impatient because it was useless to be anxious. They could not penetrate the void to find that subspace. Moreover, according to that person, the next subspace would approach the 10th realm again in 3 days. Everyone still had this bit of patience. Time was also approaching the node of the subspace again day by day. Chapter 1495. 3 days of time flashed by. These 3 days of time were undoubtedly extremely difficult to endure for numerous people that possessed exuberant ambition, especially to numerous experts that possessed exuberant ambition yet lacked strength. The Grand Tao fragment was the only way for them to charge through the obstacles in one go in a short period of time and compete with the numerous geniuses. 3 days later, a huge aura began to spread in the space. Everyone could feel the violent fluctuations of the plane. Although it was impossible for ordinary people to feel the fluctuations of space, for these celestial realm experts, they had long become one with the world. They could feel any changes between heaven and earth. Soon, everyone realized that the time of the dimensional collision in the 10th realm was finally about to begin. Rumble! Waves of spatial fluctuations in the sky were like water ripples. Circles of waves swept out. At this time, this originally barren mountain range faintly showed some different scenes. Some scenes from the dimensional space suddenly appeared in front of everyone and overlapped with this mountain range. Charge! No one knew who shouted. Suddenly, many people turned into streams of light and rushed in. When they rushed into the void was like the surface of water. There were waves of fluctuations, and everyone rushed in. Yi Xuan followed closely behind many experts and rushed in. However, he saw that this was a barren dimensional space. Not to mention, compared to the ancient Baron's continent, even a small world derived from the 10th realm couldn't be compared. There wasn't even any life. There were violent space storms everywhere, and there were even holes everywhere. A lot of chaos poured out. It didn't have the basic elements for survival at all. Swish! Yi Xuan had just rushed into the subspace, and in an instant he felt countless astral winds blowing over, just like a bone-piercing steel knife, blowing his clothes and scratching his face, making him feel pain. Everyone couldn't care less about these. They raised their chi shields and rushed directly into the deepest part of the dimensional space. In the deepest part of this dimensional space, there was a fist-sized fragment glowing with colorful light floating in the void. Great Path Fragment. Everyone saw this Great Path Fragment. Although it wasn't big, it was extremely terrifying. Countless laws appeared around it and flashed. Ah! 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 A few heaven-tier elites who were fast enough had just rushed into the range of this Great Tao Fragment, but they only heard a series of screams. The space they were in suddenly broke into two, and their whole bodies were also inevitably broken into two in an instant. They all screamed as they were torn to death by the cracks in the space. This is a spatial rupture. Many people were stunned on the spot. There were also some knowledgeable people who recognized that this was a spatial fault. This kind of spatial fault was undoubtedly a very terrifying existence for warriors. No matter what kind of life it was, it had to survive in a variety of spaces. If a spatial fault appeared, then the life that lived in it would undoubtedly be cut off on the spot, unless one's body was tyrannical enough to resist the scene when the space collapsed. Yi Xuan also recognized this space fault. When the Grand Tao fragment manifested the laws, it definitely manifested the laws of space. That's why it's incompatible with the other spaces and formed such a spatial fault in the end. The laws of space and time were recognized as one of the most mysterious and difficult to understand laws. The laws of time were known as the domain of the gods. It was rumored that the gods had mastered the mystery of time, which was why they could exist forever with the world. And the laws of space were also known as the laws that only heaven-tier elites had the qualifications to initially come into contact with. Compared to other laws, whether it was the laws of space or the laws of time, they undoubtedly appeared to be a bit more high-end. Charge! Although the spatial fault was difficult to deal with, it wasn't impossible. Many people hesitated for a moment, and then they raised their heaven-level instruments and rushed in. They used the heaven-level instruments to protect themselves from being cut by the spatial fault. And one of the starlights was the first to move. It took the lead and was far ahead. It used endless starlight to protect itself, and then it rushed towards the Great Path fragment. Wei Tianxiang, how dare you? You actually dare to covet the Great Path fragment. At this time, an extremely cold voice came from the sky. Then, the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders who had been hiding finally couldn't help but make a move. Although there were only 10 left, in terms of momentum, it didn't decrease at all. In fact, it was even a bit stronger than before. The battle in the 8th realm had made them even more powerful. 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders. Do you want to take all the benefits? How is that possible? At this time, Wei Tianxiang said disdainfully. He took the lead and drew a star map to protect himself. Behind him, the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders chased closely, not letting up in the slightest. How can you forget about me when there are benefits? At this time, another loud laugh was heard, and a tall figure directly rushed into the battlefield. It was none other than Zhu Yi. Compared to over a month ago, Zhu Ye's aura had become even more unfathomable and terrifying. And there was a figure that moved even faster. In an instant, it had already caught up to the leader of the crowd. It was Yin Feichen, whose identity was unknown. Then another sword light flashed, and in an instant, a cyan figure followed closely behind. Even the Yu Maiden sword, Ah Qing, also appeared. These were all existences that used to call the wind and summon the rain in the 10th realm. Although they had been dormant under the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders for a period of time, when they saw the Great Path fragment, they couldn't help but appear one after another. Mixed in with these people, Yishuan no longer held back. The power of wind and thunder instantly unfolded behind him, and in an instant, he directly rushed in as fast as lightning. Boom! The space fault ruthlessly chopped Yishuan's body like a sharp blade. This was the most powerful space blade of space martial technique. It didn't even need to chop the opponent's body. It could directly chop the space where the opponent was located, and the opponent would naturally be chopped by it. Yishuan only felt an incomparably powerful force constantly tearing his body apart, as if it wanted to tear his body into two halves according to a certain law. This was the terrifying power of space. Even the experts of Celestial Realm were afraid of encountering space turbulence. Otherwise, even they might directly die on the spot. Fortunately, Yishuan had already entered the 10th level of Tyrant Body Scripture. If it was the 9th level, perhaps he would have been seriously injured on the spot. It was no wonder that those Heaven Realm experts died on the spot. There was also a fundamental reason for this. Yishuan immediately did not stop. He didn't even take out any magic tools. All the pores on his body spewed out golden divinity, covering his entire body. In an instant, he turned into a golden god, instantly suppressing the powerful tearing force. His figure was not obstructed at all, and he took another step forward on the spot. Although he had moved later, his speed was extremely fast. In an instant, he had already caught up with everyone's footsteps. Damn, how can this be? Suddenly, a burst of cursing came from the front. They saw that an extremely frightening thing had happened to his body. His hair was slowly turning yellow and snow white at a speed visible to the naked eye. His appearance had almost turned from a young man to a middle-aged man in an instant. His vitality had been consumed for thousands of years in such a short period of time. The time was too short, but the change was too fast. By the time he reacted, it was already too late. He had already rushed too deep. Hiss! Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. What was going on? Time law. This must be the time law. Someone instantly reacted. Everyone couldn't help but feel a chill run down their spine. The law of time turned out to be the most mysterious law of time that only deities could master. Time was the most difficult power for a martial artist to master, but it was also the power that they most desired to master. Even when warriors defied heaven and changed their fate, didn't they also want to stop the passage of time? First, there was the space law blocking the way, and now there was the time law. Even these powerhouses who dominated the 10th realm couldn't break through. This itself was a kind of horror. Sure enough, I said that the Great Way Law fragment is not so easy to obtain. If it was so easy, it would have been taken long ago during the Heavenly Court's hegemony. But this is too terrifying. There's still a way to forcefully pass through a spatial fault. But what about the manifestation of the laws of time? Even if all of us are young geniuses and each of us still has a few thousand years of lifespan, but will probably be exhausted to death by the laws of time before we can even charge to the side of this grand Tao fragment. Many people had lingering fears. Although they still had thousands of years of lifespan, even they could not bear to be consumed like this. Everyone stopped in their tracks. Even the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry, Wei Tianxiang, Yin Feichen, Qing, Zhu Yi, and Yi Shiwen were no exception. No one would take their lifespan as a joke, especially when they saw that Wei Tianxiang had consumed thousands of years of lifespan to fly inside for such a short distance. It was enough to stop their ambitions. Yi Shiwen, you still dare to appear? The 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry finally had the time to look at how many competitors there were, and among them, they found Yi Shiwen as expected. Chapter 1496. Although almost all of the people present had been killed by the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry, the one they wanted to kill the most was undoubtedly Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen was not only one of their competitors to dominate the 10th world, but most importantly, the Wang family had a high bounty on his head. As long as they could kill Yi Shiwen, it could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. Since they couldn't think of a way to deal with the law of time, where the flow of time was extremely fast, it was obvious that the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry wanted to get rid of these opponents who were hindering their domination of the 10th world in advance. Rumble! The entire 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry began to charge, and in an instant, countless illusions appeared around them. They were all shadows of slaughter, and it was as if thousands of soldiers and horses were sweeping out. Although they were only illusions, they were not without lethality. If one dared to underestimate these illusions, one would suffer a big loss sooner or later. Many people felt the tyranny of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry. If they said they would attack without the slightest hesitation. They were the overlords of this 10th world, and the only overlord. Schwa. The speed of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry was extremely fast. In just an instant, they had already attacked in front of Yi Shiwen. When everyone was still looking at the bloody battlefield formed by the illusions that filled the sky, the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry had already arrived in front of Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen suddenly felt a sharp edge piercing through the air, locking him within and enveloping his body. An incomparably terrifying long spear directly approached in front of Yi Shiwen's eyebrows, wanting to pierce through Yi Shiwen. Such a terrifying spear, with a terrifying strength that was difficult to avoid. Even a Celestial Realm expert couldn't avoid it. The iron spear had already approached within 3 feet of him in an instant, and was almost going to pierce through his head in an instant. Yi Shiwen's face didn't show the slightest trace of panic. At this moment, he had entered a realm as calm as water, like an ancient well without ripples. It was difficult for any kind of fluctuation to shake his mind. Zheng! Suddenly, his eyes snapped open. Boundless golden light burst out and formed a golden wall in front of him, blocking the spear light in an instant. Boom! The long spear directly penetrated the golden wall. That iron spear carried an unparalleled and supreme might. It was like a hot knife through butter. After breaking through the golden wall, its momentum didn't decrease. and it instantly penetrated Yi Shiwen's figure. Whoosh! The long spear directly passed through Yi Shiwen's figure and failed to stab him. Yi Shiwen's attack had been thwarted a moment ago, but it had already won enough time for Yi Shiwen. Whoosh! When Yi Shiwen's figure reappeared, he had already rushed into the midst of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry. Bastard! How dare you! Many experts of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry roared in succession. This Yi Shiwen had dared to rush into their midst. This was simply an insult to them. Yi Shiwen didn't say anything. He just clenched his 5 fingers into a fist and punched out instantly. The entire void was torn apart by this punch, and a loud and sharp piercing sound was heard. As fast as lightning, everything happened in an instant. One of the 13 iron-blooded eagle riders didn't even have time to dodge. He could only watch as the golden fist came closer and closer. Bang! His whole body was like a cannonball, and he and his horse were blasted away by Yi Shiwen's punch. With the terrifying power of Yi Shiwen's Tyrant Body Level 10, he didn't even need to add any martial arts to it. Just the power alone was enough to blast through the mountains and crush the stars. Bang! 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 He and his horse bounced on the ground a few times, and then there was no sound. He had been seriously injured in an instant. Damn it! Yi Shiwen instantly felt that several long spears had locked onto him in the void, and the terrifying spear light was like a piercing light. Especially the leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders. He was even more furious. Yi Shiwen had actually rushed into the formation of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders in front of him, and seriously injured one of his teammates. It was simply a great humiliation. Whoosh! The wind and thunder wings behind Yi Shiwen spread out again, and his figure directly disappeared again, tearing the vast sky. It was simply faster than teleportation. Other Celestial Realm Masters needed to teleport to achieve this speed, but he could only achieve it with the speed of his physical body. From this, it could be seen how terrifying he was. The long spear pierced through the golden figure, and only some blood came out. Although Yi Shiwen's speed was fast, his realm was still too far away. On the spot, he was grazed by the long spear, and blood spurted out like a pillar. Found you! The leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders followed the blood, and instantly found Yi Shiwen's location. The long spear almost did not stop and pointed into the void. Bang! The void was instantly torn by the spear chi and shattered into pieces, but Yi Shiwen's figure was nowhere to be seen. Really ridiculous. Can you find me just by relying on these bloodstains? Yi Shiwen's voice had once again appeared in the formation of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders. His body had already stopped bleeding, and in that instant, this small injury had been completely healed by the Phoenix regeneration technique. Damn, not good. The leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders immediately realized that it was not good, and directly turned around, and with a powerful dragon, he pierced through the void and instantly nailed in front of Yi Shiwen. But at this time, it was already too late. Both of Yi Shiwen's hands were surging with countless sword chi, and in an instant, the entire sky was about to be cut in half. Poochie! Poochie! 2 sounds of the sword chi piercing into the flesh were heard, accompanied by the spurting of blood. 2 arms flew high, and 2 knights suddenly screamed. Yi Shiwen, who was sandwiched between them, instantly attacked, and the sword chi directly cut off one of their left and one of their right hands. In such a short period of time, 2 more knights suffered serious injuries and directly became disabled. In just a moment, such an unforeseen event had already happened. Good, very strong. I did not expect this Yi Shiwen to be so strong. I originally thought that he was chased and disappeared, and I thought that he was definitely not the opponent of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders, but I did not expect him to be so terrifying. No, I think we all thought wrong. It is not that Yi Shiwen is not the opponent of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders, but he is not the opponent of the leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders. If someone had said such words before, perhaps everyone would have scoffed at it, because what was the difference? Now everyone knew that there was a big difference between the two. Yi Shiwen was indeed not a match for the leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders, but he was able to oppress the other 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders like a dead dog. This kind of unequal disparity might not be considered a big deal in ordinary times, just like Qing, Feichen, and the others who had escaped from the hands of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders, but they did not occupy too much of an advantage and could only barely protect themselves. But Yi Shiwen's speed was too fast, so he was able to severely injure the other 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders before the leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders could react. Very strong. No wonder the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders were unable to do anything to him before. Damn, if you have the ability, then stand there obediently and let me kill you. The leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders roared in anger. Do you think I am an idiot? Yi Shiwen said with a sneer. But I am also too lazy to play with you. The blood debt you owe? It is not that the time has not come yet. As Yi Shiwen said, he immediately stepped out, turned into a ball of golden light, and directly rushed towards the great Tao fragment. Suddenly there was silence, and everyone felt a little dumbfounded. No matter how imaginative a person was, they probably would not have thought that he would actually rush towards the great Tao fragment. Is he crazy? Or has he gone crazy thinking about this? No, he is actually fine. Soon, someone discovered that Yi Shiwen, who rushed into the great Tao fragment, was actually fine. He was not like Wei Tianxiang, whose lifespan was directly reduced by the power of time. How is this possible? Could it be that there is no power of time in the vicinity? Yes, it must be like this. Everyone was shocked, especially Wei Tianxiang, who had just consumed 1,000 years of his lifespan, was even a little crazy. Why? Why did he lose 1,000 years of his lifespan as soon as he entered? But Yi Shiwen was fine. He immediately stepped out of the starlight that filled the sky and rushed in again. However, the moment he rushed in, he stopped in his tracks because he discovered that a terrifying situation had occurred. The instant he stepped in, another 100 years of his lifespan had been reduced for nothing. He rushed in along the passage that Yi Shiwen had just entered, but Yi Shiwen was fine. But he had lost 100 years of his lifespan, and there were more white parts on his head. How is this possible? Impossible? Everyone was stunned. This was even more shocking than Yi Shiwen rushing in just now. If he found a path that was not affected by the power of time, then it would be fine, but now it seemed that this was obviously not the case. Everyone was stunned, and they could only watch Yi Shiwen getting closer and closer to the great Tao fragment. This is divinity. Interesting. Feichen frowned as he looked at the golden light on Yi Shiwen's body and seemed to recognize divinity. In an instant, he seemed to be thinking about something, but then he just smiled slightly. He seemed to have figured out a little why Yi Shiwen could rush into the vicinity of the great Tao fragment. Time was a domain that only gods could touch, and with the protection of divinity, it was indeed possible to resist the flow of the law of time. Indeed, Yi Shiwen relied on divinity to resist the erosion of the law of time, but at the same time, the divinity in his body was also consumed in large quantities, and a large amount of divinity was consumed every minute and every second. Even Yi Shiwen could not stay in such an environment for a long time. The environment here had long been transformed by the accumulation of this great Tao fragment, and it was very dangerous. He grabbed the great path fragment in his hand and swallowed it in one gulp almost at the first possible moment. Chapter 1497. Stop! When they saw Yi Shiwen swallowing the great Tao fragment into his stomach, many people immediately roared out. Didn't they come here for the sake of this great Tao fragment? But now, it had actually fallen into Yi Shiwen's hands. Their hearts were simply bleeding. My great Wei fragment! My great Wei fragment! Especially the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders. They were even more furious. Yi Shiwen had just injured several of them in one breath. At this time, how could they not be angry? But there was no other way. Facing the space fault, they had a way to rush in. But facing the time turbulence, they had no way. Just now, there were a few people who tried to rush into the time turbulence. The final result was either thousands of years of lifespan like Wei Tianxiang, or they finally entered a situation where they could only move at the speed of a tortoise. Others walked for a year, but they could only move for a second. In the end, everyone could only watch them move slowly as if they were in a slow-motion movie. Yi Shiwen sneered. How could he not know what they were thinking? But he did not stop at all. These were all wolves. If he was the slightest bit careless, he might be killed by these guys who had already killed in a frenzy. And at this time, he did not have time to think too much. The moment this great wave fragment was swallowed into his stomach, countless laws of space and time suddenly manifested in his body. Some were fast, some were slow. If it was just the laws of space, it would be fine. His body had already been cultivated to the level of indestructible Vajra. Whether it was his skin or internal organs, they had already reached an extremely powerful level. But Yi Shiwen had no way to control the time, so a very strange situation occurred. His head began to gradually age, but his limbs began to become younger and younger. This was caused by the completely unequal time turbulence. He's crazy. If this goes on, he will directly die of old age. Seeing Yi Shiwen like this, many people immediately gloated. If they could not get it, it was best for others not to get it. In particular, this person was actually Yi Shiwen. Among them, the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders felt very happy. But they were not happy for long. Soon, they discovered that Yi Shiwen's body bloomed with a burst of golden light, which was used to resist the power of time. In an instant, the power of time had no way to affect Yi Shiwen's body. But the price of this was that the consumption of Yi Shiwen's divinity suddenly accelerated. With the exception of the erosion of 2 layers of time power, the divinity in his body was consumed at an astonishing speed. Divinity itself was a power that only gods could possess. It wasn't something that mortals could possess. Yi Shiwen had practiced gilded tyrant form with great perseverance, and had transformed his body to produce divinity. Although the process was slow, but the divinity that he had obtained from hunting demon beasts on the demon island would have long been exhausted if he hadn't done so. Therefore, even if he had successfully cultivated the gilded tyrant form, he would rarely use it. This was because if the divinity was consumed too quickly, it would take a long time to replenish it. But at this time, in order to digest the great Tao fragments, there was no other way. He could only let the divinity that had been accumulated for a long time be consumed crazily. He gritted his teeth. The mysterious space in his body began to operate crazily, and the spirit crystals in Tianyuan Mirror also began to be consumed crazily. This was the most terrifying consumption in Yi Shiwen's history. In the past, the consumption of millions of spirit crystals per second was already extremely terrifying, but now, the consumption of tens of millions of spirit crystals per second was often the consumption of tens of millions of spirit crystals. The great Tao fragments were different from any martial arts that Yi Shiwen had obtained before. All the previous martial arts had traces of artificial, and they had been simplified to a certain extent, or the traces of the great Tao were turned into martial arts that could be understood by oneself. But the style of this great Tao fragment was original, without any modification at all. For Yi Shiwen, he could only faintly touch a little bit of understanding on ordinary days. Fortunately, he had killed a lot of masters during this time, and these were all masters of the celestial realm. Each of them had billions of spirit crystals, and some even had tens of billions of spirit crystals, which could support Yi Shiwen's current consumption. Otherwise, even if he had obtained the great Tao fragment, it would be impossible to carry out such a crazy analysis. Now that he directly swallowed it into his stomach, he could only feel that the great Tao was unprecedentedly clear, as if the stars that could not be seen in the sky were suddenly grabbed to his side to observe. A night of enlightenment, a day of ascension. It was nothing more than this. There was only this sentence left in his mind, and everything else was operating crazily to absorb the information contained in the great Tao fragment. Originally, it was impossible for Yi Shiwen to directly interpret and comprehend it, but with the power of the mysterious space, he could actually interpret it. When the others saw that Yi Shiwen not only was not eroded by the power of time, but on the contrary, seemed to be doing it with ease, they could not help but be extremely shocked, and were almost scared to death. Even they had not thought of directly swallowing it like Yi Shiwen. At most, they would collect it and see if there was any way for them to comprehend it or bring it back to their masters. If they could obtain the great Tao fragment, then no matter what, it would not be considered as a wasted trip. Even the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders and the others, no matter how much they hated Yi Shiwen, were dumbfounded at this time. Was he still a human? How could his body withstand it? Abnormal. The more it was like this, the more intense the killing intent in their eyes became. Such a person must not be allowed to have a chance to grow, otherwise they might really be finished. At this time, Yi Shiwen did not know what everyone was thinking in their hearts. The only thing he could think of now was to digest the great Tao fragment as soon as possible. As he digested more things, his cultivation would also improve. This was not something that could be done in a short period of time. If it was someone else, they would definitely die, but fortunately, he still had the word seal. If it really did not work, he would seal it at the end. Anyway, there were enough strange things in his body, so a little more did not matter. He only felt that he was almost obsessed with the comprehension of the great Tao, and there was a comfortable feeling all over his body. Compared to this feeling, other things were not worth mentioning at all, and he even gradually lost himself in the great Tao. If this continued, his whole body might directly transform into the great Tao on the spot and finally unconsciously combine with the great Tao, turning into nothingness. If it was not for the Mingxin ancient tree that pulled him back at every critical moment, he did not know what would have happened to him. He only felt that his comprehension of the great Tao was constantly deepening. But in the eyes of others, it was Yi Shiwen's cultivation that was constantly skyrocketing. Every once in a while, his breath would skyrocket. The surging qi and blood intertwined into a huge pillar of qi, soaring into the sky, and swept up in circles, forming a huge tornado of qi around his body. The onlookers were frightened out of their wits. Was this still the first level of Celestial Being Realm? The first level of Celestial Being Realm was already so terrifying. If he rushed into the second level of Celestial Being Realm, how terrifying would it be? But they did not have to wait for long. Yi Shiwen, who was originally at the peak of the first level of Celestial Being Realm, finally rushed into the second level of Celestial Being Realm with a loud bang. Boom! In his body, a terrifying breath swept up, and even the surrounding time turbulence was a little shaken. Just as he had predicted before, after obtaining the great Tao fragment, his whole body fell into a state of enlightenment, and his cultivation continued to rise. After entering the second level of Celestial Being Realm, he did not stagnate at all. On the contrary, he continued to rise until he reached the peak of the second level of Celestial Being Realm, and then stopped. Yi Shiwen slowly opened his eyes, and there was a bit of unwillingness in his eyes to wake up from this state of enlightenment, but there was no other way. As the saying goes, one night of enlightenment, one day of ascension. He could have continued to rush all the way to the third level of Celestial Being Realm, or even the fourth level, but the spirit crystals were almost consumed. The consumption of tens of millions per second, even if he had gained a lot during this time, was almost consumed in a short time, and it was not enough for him to continue to understand. Moreover, his divinity was almost consumed. If this continued, he would be eroded to death by this power of time sooner or later. However, after breaking into the second level of Celestial Being Realm in one fell swoop, the remaining medicinal power of the 9 Revolutions Taishian Golden Pill had also been consumed, and all turned into his martial power. In the eyes of everyone, Yi Shiwen slowly got up, and the terrible momentum of his body broke out bit by bit, and the golden qi and blood surged like a stormy sea. After sealing the great Tao fragment with the pseudo-Tao rune seal, Yi Shiwen looked at the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders and said coldly, "You still haven't left. It seems that you are really greedy, like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. If the heavens want people to die, they must first make people crazy. I think it's you who will die. Come out and fight us fair and square if you have the ability." A knight of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders couldn't stand Yi Shiwen's provocation at this time, and suddenly shouted, "A fair and square battle? As you wish," Yi Shiwen said with a sneer. Bang! He suddenly stepped on the ground, and the void suddenly collapsed, and a powerful force instantly spread out. Whoosh! His figure tore through the void with a deafening sound, and the sky was filled with his afterimages. In an instant, he had already arrived in front of the knight. "Stop!" The leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders reacted, but it was too late. Boom! With a loud sound, the knight's head was pressed into the ground by Yi Shiwen along with his horse. In the smoke and dust, Yi Shiwen's figure was like a demon. Who else wants to fight fair and square? Chapter 1498. Who else wants to fight fair and square? In the smoke, Yi Shiwen's body was like a devil. His ice-cold gaze caused people to shiver. Yi Shiwen stretched out his big hand and grabbed the knight, who had been pressed into the ground by him, into the Tianyuan mirror. He had already been seriously injured by Yi Shiwen, so there was no room for him to fight back. "What are you going to do to him?" A knight roared angrily. "The person who will kill you is not me. Someone else will," Yi Shiwen said coldly. Shwa! His figure disappeared in the void, leaving only an afterimage that quickly dissipated. "Everyone be careful. Get into formation." At this time, the leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders quickly shouted. The 6 knights gathered in a circle. For them, who had come from the battlefield, the real power was still the strength after the formation. Perhaps they were not the strongest alone, but if they formed a team of more than 10 people, the power of their formation was enough to kill 10 masters of the same level in an instant. At this time, in addition to the 3 who had fallen in the 8th world, the one who had been seriously injured by Yi Shiwen, the other 2 who had their arms cut off by Yi Shiwen, and the one who had been captured by Yi Shiwen, there were a total of 6 people left. However, after they formed the formation, their momentum suddenly changed, instantly rising, terrifying and peerless, sweeping in all directions. Compared with a moment ago, it was simply incomparable. Even if the masters were stronger than them, it was impossible to fight them head-on. This was the role of the military formation. Compared to ordinary formations, the military formation was more inclined to the aspect of killing, and its power was more tremendous and terrifying. It was enough to kill almost all the powerhouses of the same level. Moreover, they were rich in combat experience. Even if there were only 2 people left, they could still form the military formation without the slightest bit of weakness. "Is it too late?" Yi Shiwen's cold voice appeared among them. "We are waiting for you." At this time, the leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders suddenly turned around, and the Jinyuan crazily gushed out of his whole body. The long spear turned into a long dragon and instantly pierced towards Yi Shiwen, extremely terrifying. The void shattered and turned into a terrifying storm that instantly rushed towards Yi Shiwen. The terrifying fighting power of a master of the 5th level of Celestial Being Realm was instantly reflected. He possessed unimaginable strength. This time, Yi Shiwen didn't even try to hide. He raised his hand and opened his palm. Clang! The tip of the spear fiercely stabbed into his palm, but it did not feel as if it had pierced into flesh. On the contrary, the leader of the 13 Iron-Blooded Eagle Cavalry could clearly feel a terrifying power instantly reverberate through the spear and back at him. The sound of metal clashing rang out. The endless storm, the terrifying sharpness, everything that could not be stopped was crushed into pieces in an instant. His arm began to tremble violently. When he looked at his palm again, it had completely cracked open and was a mess of flesh and blood. He was shocked. He knew his physical body very well. As a soldier on the battlefield, his physical body was naturally very strong. However, at this time, the web between his thumb and index finger had been torn open by the recoil force. This was something that was impossible in itself. And at this moment when he was in a daze, a loud sound rang out in an instant, followed by an extremely piercingly cold sound of the void tearing. A knight was punched by Yi Shiwen on the spot. The dragon horse's head was smashed by Yi Shiwen's punch on the spot, and the knight's chest was also punched by Yi Shiwen. The iron clothes on his body were shattered inch by inch, and his body flew out like a kite with a broken string, crashing into a mountain peak. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. In an instant, another knight was severely injured. So strong, he's simply ridiculously strong. Compared to just now, he's like a different person. It's simply incredible. He just stepped into the 2nd level of Celestial Being Realm from the 1st level of Celestial Being Realm, and he's actually strong to such an extent. It's simply terrifying. There's actually such a monster. It's really terrifying. Clang, clang, clang. The remaining few knights of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders were instantly enraged. Several iron spears instantly pierced through the vast sky, interweaving into a large net in the sky, crushing the vacuum and directly pouncing towards Yi Shiwen. If it was the Yi Shiwen from before, he would definitely not be able to escape. But now that he had stepped into the second level of Celestial Being Realm, his cultivation had already undergone earth-shaking changes. Whoosh! These iron spears instantly penetrated Yi Shiwen's body, but only pierced the golden light. In the next moment, Yi Shiwen once again appeared above their heads and suddenly stomped down with his foot. It was an ordinary foot, but it was extremely fast and also as heavy as Mount Tai. A knight could not dodge in time and was kicked by Yi Shiwen. Bang! The dragon horse he was riding on had all its limbs broken, and it died while vomiting blood with a sad cry. But this knight was not much better. The power of Yi Shiwen's 10th level tyrant body was so terrifying. With just one kick, all the bones in his body seemed to be broken in an instant, and he did not know how many pieces were broken. Bang! His whole body was sent flying by Yi Shiwen's kick, and like a cannonball, he directly crashed into a mountain peak and only stopped for more. Yi Shiwen's cold and ruthless voice reached the ears of the remaining few knights. At this time, a hint of fear finally flashed in their cold eyes. They had never been so terrified before. They had survived from thousands of people, and they had always been the ones who gave others the fear of death. No one could make them feel despair like Yi Shiwen. He was like a demon god, and they were not his opponent at all. Motherf Astris Kerr, so strong. Ji curled his lips and said, even if he had some confidence now, he did not dare to say that he could take care of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders like dead dogs. This was not something an ordinary person could do. But when he looked at Yi Shiwen, his eyes were overflowing with battle intent, as if he had found an excellent opponent. You dare to hurt them. A cold and slightly hoarse voice rang out from the mouth of the leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry. His eyes were as cold as a wild beast's, and at this moment, it was more like a roar from an injured beast. Today, I will make you die without a burial place. He was already extremely angry, and his body emitted circles of blood chi. His murderous aura exploded with a loud bang, turning into a gale that spread out in all directions. This gale was mixed with countless blood chi and murderous aura. It was extremely frightening. What a terrifying, murderous aura. How many people did he kill to achieve this? Someone said in surprise, his voice somewhat trembling. It is said that the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders killed their way out of a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. Now it seems that it is not false at all. What a terrifying group of people. No matter what, he is a terrifying existence at the peak of the 5th sky of the celestial realm. The eyes of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders leader instantly turned crimson, and the imposing aura on his body rose bit by bit, as if he was slaughtering Azura from hell. No one knew where the blood chi came from, but it condensed in his long spear, and actually, drop by drop, it slid down his long spear. Dripping onto the ground, it soaked the entire ground. The scene was extremely frightening. Die for me. The imposing aura of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders leader finally rose to the peak. Compared to him just now, it was unknown how many times stronger he was. Obviously, he had used some secret technique of the battlefield. Today, I will make you regret coming to this world and die without a burial place. He roared, and the dragon horse under him also seemed to feel the powerful murderous aura of its master, and the scales on its body also turned crimson. It did not look like a dragon horse, but rather a nightmare that had crawled out from the blood lake hell. Rumble, the dragon horse finally moved and trod across the vast sky. Wherever it passed, the void would shatter, and the powerful shockwaves caused by the shockwaves were deafening. And the heroic leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders, who was sitting upright on this dragon horse, was like a god. His hair fluttered in the wind, and a peerless, imposing aura pervaded from his body, as if it could swallow the mountains and rivers. His long spear instantly moved, and the powerful and sharp spear light pounced out like a vast ocean. The starry sky collapsed in all directions, and a huge crack was torn open wherever his spear tip passed. That terrifying, murderous aura was released, and many experts who were watching the battle from afar could not help but turn pale. They staggered in fear, as if they had seen some kind of ghost or god. Clang! The spear tip tore through the vast sky, and in an instant, it had already reached Yi Shiwen's eyebrows, as if it could blow up Yi Shiwen's head in the next second. However, in the face of such a peerless attack, Yi Shiwen did not move at all. His hair fluttered, and the blood in his whole body instantly boiled up. He spread out his big hands and suddenly grabbed towards that long spear. Clang! The sound of gold and iron colliding rang out, and the spear tip reached Yi Shiwen's palm, but it could not pierce through Yi Shiwen's palm at all, just like the situation just now. There was silence, and no sound could be heard. But in the next instant, the entire void began to shatter crazily and collapsed. The power of the confrontation between the two swept out directly, and with a rumble, it turned into a crazy storm, sweeping in all directions. Everyone's clothes fluttered in the wind, but they were all shocked. Everyone was shocked that the leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders was able to unleash such a peerless attack. If they were in his place, would they be able to block it? Soon, everyone shook their heads. It was impossible. Such a peerless attack. Even a real expert at the 5th level of the Celestial Realm would be instantly pierced through by the spear. Previously, when they saw Yi Shiwen fooling him, they thought that he was incapable. Now, it seemed that it was not that he was incapable, but that Yi Shiwen was really too terrifying. Chapter 1499. Everyone was astonished by the peerless attack of the leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders. But they were even more astonished by Yi Shiwen's invincible bravery. In the face of such an attack, he was actually able to remain motionless like a boulder. This is impossible. The pupils of the leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders shrank slightly. He couldn't believe it. How could this be? His spear could be said to have blasted out an unprecedented powerful force. His peerless spear actually couldn't make Yi Shiwen waver even a little. Why is this impossible? Do you still understand? From the moment I stepped into the second sky of the Celestial Realm, your life has already begun to count down. Yi Shiwen said coldly. His eyes were threatening, looking down on the crowd. I don't believe it. The leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders instantly erupted with an even more powerful blood chi. His whole body was covered with blood chi, as if he was invaded by this blood chi, but his momentum was even more powerful. He held the blood-red spear in his hand, pointed it at Yi Shiwen, and instantly rushed out. The dragon horse he was riding on roared, and the heaven and earth were shattered. This was clearly a long dragon that looked up to the sky and roared, not a war horse. The murderous aura was overwhelming. Naive. Yi Shiwen sneered, and his body instantly moved forward. His 5 fingers clenched into a fist, and the golden fist power surged out. Wherever the fist power passed, the vast sky was shattered, and it blasted towards the leader's spear. Rumble! The earth was trembling. An incomparably dazzling light bloomed from the two of them, covering the entire void. The murderous aura was monstrous, sweeping in all directions, and the chaotic chi poured out from the shattered cracks. For the two of them, this was an earth-shattering battle, but for the others, it was a complete disaster. The time and space turbulence, which had already been somewhat messed up by the fragments of the Great Path, became even more chaotic at this moment. At this time, the entire void began to shake violently, and it began to peel away from the void bit by bit. Not good. This space is about to break away from the 10th world. The battle between the two of them is too shocking, and it actually accelerated the speed of the space's separation. Everyone couldn't help but be horrified. Many people began to fly outside. They didn't dare to stay here any longer. If they waited until this subspace was completely separated from the 10th world, then they would be trapped in that subspace. There were even more people with faces full of horror. This kind of battle was really too shocking. There were many ambitious people who thought that their cultivation was already very shocking. Many of them were at the third sky of the celestial realm, and even not far from the fourth sky of the celestial realm. As long as they were given a little time, entering the fourth sky of the celestial realm was only a matter of time. At this time, there was a kind of sadness from the bottom of their hearts. They had never thought that someone could be so much stronger than them. They had never thought, even the most terrifying thing, even the experts from the 13 Iron Eagle Riders were still, and that they were iron ye sky of, and they were also forced to enter into the heaven of the 10 world. From this, it could be seen how powerful the experts of the other worlds were, and how big the gap was between them and those top experts. They did not know that the strength of the leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders was absolutely enough to be ranked in the top 100, but for the sake of his 12 brothers, he had to come to the 10th world to compete for the quota. Otherwise, he would not have any chance at all. Boom! The fist of the leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders and Yi Shiwen fiercely collided. The terrifying fist force directly swept out an incomparably powerful force. In an instant, the entire void was illuminated, and everything else lost its color. Not to mention those who were far away. Even the warhorses of the other knights who were not far away from them could not withstand this terrifying power, and were actually pushed out in the sky. Bang! A huge roar sounded, and the long spear in the hand of the leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders was instantly knocked out. In the previous confrontation, only the web between his thumb and index finger had ruptured, but this time his entire finger bone was completely broken, and he could not hold the long spear in his hand. Show! The long spear that was knocked out instantly turned into a stream of light in the sky, tearing the vast sky, and fiercely inserted into the ground. That huge shock caused the long spear to begin to break little by little, and in the midst of the fierce wind, it actually turned into iron sand that filled the sky. Roars! The dragon horse he was sitting on let out a neigh, and was finally unable to maintain all the strength in its body, and directly knelt down. Because its foreleg had withstood too much power, it finally could not bear it, and directly broke on the spot, and directly threw the leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders out. Run! The leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders who was thrown out stabilized his body, and quickly shouted. At this time, the remaining 3 knights who were still in good condition finally had a feeling of a sudden realization. They were defeated in this way, and it seemed to be a crushing defeat. Even if 10 of them joined forces, they would still be abused like dead dogs by Yi Shiwen. Even the most powerful leader among them was defeated by Yi Shiwen. For them, it was simply like the sky had suddenly collapsed. At this time, only then did they want to escape. If they had escaped earlier, there might have been a glimmer of opportunity. But in the face of Yi Shiwen, who had already freed up his hands, they simply did not have the slightest chance. Their many years of experience in the battlefield had completely manifested, and even if they were to escape, at this time, they appeared meticulous, and the 3 of them fled in 3 different directions. Want to escape? At this time, isn't it a little too late? A massive sword yuan appeared in Yi Shiwen's hand and madly rotated. In the void, it condensed into a giant sword and instantly flew into the sky, and then immediately turned into 3 swords on the spot and bombarded down. Bang! 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 Almost in an instant, these 3 people were seriously injured, and the dragon horse they were sitting on directly died. The long sword directly penetrated their bodies, and this was also because Yi Shiwen had held back. Otherwise, they would not have been able to survive this sword. Shwa! At this time, a stream of light flashed, and it was much faster than those people just now. It was none other than the leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry, who wanted to escape. At this point, how could he not know that the current Yi Shiwen was not someone he could deal with? Now that he thought about it, the reward that he coveted was like a death warrant, and he actually wanted to take this reward. Now, the only thought in his mind was that as long as there is life, there is hope. As long as he could escape, sooner or later, there would be a day of revenge. At the moment when he flew out of the void, a sword light broke through the vast sky and chased after him. No matter how fast he could not catch up with the speed of the sword light at all. In an instant, the sword light cut off both of his legs, and his whole body directly rolled down from the void, and he was seriously injured in an instant. Rumble! The entire subspace and the 10th world were also peeling off faster and more violently. At this time, many celestial realm masters could already feel that the space was violently fluctuating, and they were escaping bit by bit. "Brother, hurry up, or else you won't be able to leave," Zhu Yi shouted from the side. Although they were celestial realm masters who had preliminary contact with the law of space and had the ability to tear the void and teleport short distances, after all, they were not omnipotent gods like in the legends. If they were isolated in the subspace, then it would be useless no matter how powerful they were. Even if they tore the void, they would not be able to find their way out. In the chaos, there was no north, south, east, or west, and there was no difference between everything. Yi Shiwen smiled at him and said, "It's okay. You go first." Then, Yi Shiwen put the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry's knights, who had just been seriously injured by him, into the Tianyuan mirror one by one, and locked them up with the God Rule chains. He did not kill them, and these people would be handed over to Green Conch to deal with. After all, the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry's knights were put into the Tianyuan mirror. Yi Shiwen flew towards the 10th world. In an instant, in the void, he turned into a ball of golden light, and in a split second, he had already flown out of this subspace. So fast! Many experts who were paying attention to Yi Shiwen couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Although they had already experienced Yi Shiwen's speed, they couldn't help but sigh with emotion when they saw Yi Shiwen's speed again under such circumstances. He was simply an evildoer without any flaws. Although they were shocked by Yi Shiwen's means, when they saw all 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry fall in Yi Shiwen's hands, everyone could not help but cheer sincerely. Although Yi Shiwen was also an outsider, and was destined to occupy one of the quotas, and might even enter the first world as the top ranker of the 10th world, but it was still better than letting the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders occupy one of the quotas. After all, he alone could occupy one quota at most, unlike the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders, who had occupied all the quotas. So, the Iron Blood Eagle Riders could only do nothing about it. As for the competitors from other worlds, they could only rely on themselves. For them, Yi Shiwen's actions were simply like piercing through the dark clouds in the sky and settling a big worry for them. After defeating the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry, Yi Shiwen did not stay, and took the lead to turn into a ball of golden light and left. He could not wait to let Green Conch deal with the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry. After Yi Shiwen left, Yin Feichen, Zhu Yiqing, and the others also left one after another. Since the Great Path Fragment had been taken by Yi Shiwen, there was no need for them to stay for long. Moreover, if it was before, they might still have the intention to take it by force. But now, facing such a strong Yi Shiwen, how could they still have such thoughts? They could not even defeat the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry, let alone Yi Shiwen, who easily defeated them. Chapter 1500. In the valley, the 10 members of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders were lying on the ground. All of them were locked by the God Rule chains, so they had no way to move at all. They could only glare at Yi Shiwen and Green Conch. "I've caught them for you," said Yi Shiwen while looking at Green Conch. Green Conch also looked at Yi Shiwen in shock. Although she hated the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders to the core, she did not expect Yi Shiwen to really capture them. Moreover, he had captured all of them without missing a single one. Then she looked at the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders with hatred. If it weren't for these people, how could her two brothers who were like fathers and brothers die so tragically? These are all their fault. Now that things have come to this, what else do you have to say? Said Green Conch coldly as she looked at them. What else is there to say? The winner takes it all, said the leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders unyieldingly. Good, that's very good. Then go to hell, said Green Conch coldly. You better think this through. What kind of status does our Wang family have? If you kill us, your entire sect will be annihilated. The leader of the 13 Iron-Blood Eagle Riders said coldly. However, he was stating a cold, hard fact. Although death and injury were inevitable during the imperial court struggle, would the Wang family let it go after losing so many geniuses in one go? They were a Ho family, and the top Ho family at that. Could they be compared with those individual cultivators? No matter how many individual cultivators died, they would not look for trouble with the Ho family because they did not have the capital to do so. However, if the Ho family suffered heavy casualties, they would be the ones looking for trouble instead. Therefore, when facing the experts of the Ho family, many people would hesitate even if they attacked. Qing Luo hesitated for a moment. Indeed, if she made a move, then their sect might be annihilated. The Wang clan was known for being tough among the many marquee clans. Offending them would not end well. Even other marquee clans would fight them head-on, let alone small rogue cultivators like them. What was this? Don't worry, everyone knows that they were taken away by me. No one will know that you did it. If the Wang family wants to look for trouble, they won't be able to find you, said Yi Shiwen lightly. Hearing Yi Shiwen's words, the faces of the 13 Iron-Blood Eagle Riders suddenly turned deathly pale. Previously, they could still act tough because they were from the Marquis clan, so they naturally had this kind of confidence. But now, if Yi Shiwen were to take over everything, then their so-called Marquis clan status would become a laughable joke. Don't forget, Yi Shiwen was also born from a Marquis clan. Admittedly, the Yi clan wasn't as powerful as the Wang clan these past few years, but protecting Yi Shiwen was not a problem at all. The Wang clan wouldn't go so far as to fall out with the Yi clan for the sake of the 13 Iron-Blood Eagle Riders. After all, in the imperial court struggle, casualties were inevitable. If they wanted to settle the score, then it would be. Green Conch gratefully glanced at Yi Shiwen. Then her eyes became firm. She looked at the 13 Iron-Blood Eagle Riders. Do you know how much I hate you? I hate your heartlessness. I hate your cold-bloodedness. A long sword condensed from sword chi appeared in her hand, and she slashed it into the head of a knight. Poochie! Blood splashed out and splashed on Green Conch's body. The blood instantly soaked her clothes, but she did not seem to feel it. This sword move belongs to Senior Brother Liu. This sword move belongs to Senior Brother Sun. It was as if she had lost her soul. In the end, she kept chanting these two lines, and then killed a knight with 2 slashes. The leader of the 13 Iron-Blood Eagle Riders could only watch helplessly as his brothers were killed by Green Conch. However, there was no way for them to resist because they were bound by the God Rule chains and could not do anything about it. It's your turn. Green Conch turned to the leader of the 13 Iron-Blood Eagle Riders and slashed down with her sword. Poochie! Blood spurted out like a pillar. At this time, the leader of the 13 Iron-Blood Eagle Riders could only feel the life force frantically flowing out of his body, and his consciousness gradually blurred. Yi Shiwen watched as Green Conch beheaded the 13 Iron-Blood Eagle Riders one by one. Although she did not use any cruel means, he could feel that after beheading these 10 people, Green Conch's temperament had undergone a tremendous change. It was a kind of temperament that was necessary for a warrior. It might not be the first time she killed someone, but for him, this was more important than any previous times. Thank you, Brother Yi, for your kindness. I can't thank you enough. If you need my help in the future, I will do my best. Green Conch put away her sword, turned around, and said to Yi Shiwen. Her body was full of blood, but she was much calmer than before. It was as if she had matured overnight. No need. As I said, I am partly responsible for this matter. If it weren't for me, Brother Sun and Brother Liu would not have died. Yi Shiwen said. He did this largely because of the guilt in his heart. Now, he suddenly felt that the knot in his heart had been untied. In addition, I found a lot of number tags from their bodies, enough for both of us to enter the top 10, Yi Shiwen said. Green Conch's expression changed slightly, but in the end, she did not refuse. If it was her previous self, she might not accept it, but after a series of events, she already understood that perhaps she was a genius in her sect, a peerless genius. But in this imperial court competition, she was nothing at all. If it weren't for Yi Shiwen's help, she would not have the chance to enter the top 10 and then be valued and trained by the imperial court. If she refused, how could she face Brother Sun and Brother Lu, who had exchanged their lives for all this? At the same time, the news of Yi Shiwen severely injuring the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders and taking them away also spread throughout the entire 10th world overnight. For the entire 10th world, the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders were like a huge dark cloud, blocking all the sunlight and cutting off all their hopes. Looking at the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders, it was clear that they intended to occupy all the places, not giving them the slightest chance at all. But now that this dark cloud had been swept away by Yi Shiwen, for some ambitious people, there was no doubt that they had regained their chance. But for the 10th world, there was no doubt that it was even more chaotic. Originally, because most of the number tags were in the hands of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders, everyone did not take action, because even if they desperately tried to snatch, they would not be able to compete with the number tags in the hands of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders. But now it was different. Although the number tags had fallen into the hands of Yi Shiwen, everyone knew that Yi Shiwen was alone. He could occupy at most one place, and there were still 9 places left. After figuring this out, many people began to go a little crazy. For them, this might be the last chance. In the entire 10th world, there was another bloody storm. Many people who had calmed down began to enter a state of madness again. For those who only hoped to come in to search for treasures, this was undoubtedly a disaster. Order, this was the power of order. Even if it was as evil as the order established by the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry, it would still be much better than this chaos without any order at all. In the face of this situation, there were also people who called for Yi Shiwen and others to come forward and set rules to stop this aimless killing. But it was useless. In the face of many people's appeals, Yi Shiwen seemed to have disappeared and did not show up again. Other ambitious people, including experts like Wei Tianxiang, were also useless because they had no way to convince the masses, and they did not have the overwhelming power of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders or Yi Shiwen. The entire 10th world had fallen into a massacre. It was a bloody storm. It was even more chaotic than when the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders were here. In this chaotic scene, some people even began to blame Yi Shiwen. If it wasn't for Yi Shiwen, they wouldn't have fallen into this situation. In this regard, Yi Shiwen remained silent. He had seen too much of the evil nature of human nature. Even if he stood up, it was estimated that more people would stand up against him. Suddenly, there was a violent fluctuation in the cloudless sky, and then a figure drilled out. It was a young man in blue clothes. His handsome face was a bit insolent and unruly. His body was constantly flashing with lightning. Is this the 10th world? Haha. This is the place where my generation fights. The 10th world, I'm coming. I'll show you how powerful I, Lei Jingxuan, am. Haha. After saying that, the young man in blue clothes turned into a lightning and disappeared into the sky. If people knew about this, it was estimated that it would cause a sensation in the entire 10th world. The Thunder Clan was another top expert from the Marquis clan who had arrived in the 10th world. In the midst of the bloody storm, Lei Jingxuan's arrival was like a shocking thunder that completely woke everyone up. Originally, many people were saying that the experts from other worlds would not be far away. However, Lei Jingxuan's arrival had caught everyone off guard. As an outstanding expert of the Thunder Clan, Lei Jingxuan had displayed an incomparably formidable strength. He had consecutively challenged several top-ranked experts and defeated them. He had even killed them and seized their number plates. Thanks to the bloody storm of killing and robbery during this period of time, the number tags were concentrated in the hands of a few people. Therefore, Lei Jingxuan only defeated a few people and seized a large number of number tags. Soon, someone revealed that Lei Jingxuan was the top Heaven's Pride from the Thunder Clan of the Marquis clan. His strength had already reached the 5th level of the Celestial Realm. Moreover, there was news from other worlds that even the leader of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders was defeated by Lei Jingxuan in the end. After Lei Jingxuan learned that the current top expert of the 10th world was Yi Shiwen, and the fact that Yi Shiwen also had the most number tags, he immediately issued a challenge to Yi Shiwen. For a time, a storm was brewing. Chapter 1501. For the 10th realm, this period of time was a disaster. Lei Jingxuan was the first to cross realms, but he was not the last. One after another, powerful experts crossed over and engaged in bloody battles in all directions. Meanwhile, news of the experts in the 10th realm also spread that they had stepped into the 5th heaven of the heaven realm and engaged in fierce battles with these experts who crossed over. Both sides were fighting for a spot. Many marquee clans also revealed their ferocious faces. Compared to these marquee clans, these individual cultivators were still too inexperienced. The first piece of news was precisely Wei Tianxiang. Although Wei Tianxiang had successfully stepped into the 5th layer of the sky-human realm during this period of time, he had suffered a crushing defeat at the hands of Lei Jingxuan, becoming the first person among these experts to fail in a cross-border campaign. Then, Qing fought with another disciple of the Mystic Moon sect, Li Tianlang, and both sides were injured. The battle of the 5th heaven of the celestial realm shook the entire 10th realm, and in the process, several experts who had already stepped into the 4th heaven of the celestial realm successively lost to the experts who had crossed realms, and some even died tragically in their hands. For these masters who crossed realms, the lives and deaths of these people were not of concern to them. This also caused the collective anger of the masters in the 10th realm. They even planned several ambushes, but the result was that all the masters who went to ambush were killed. The facts prove that even the masters who crossed realms were not people they could deal with. Then, they found Yin Fei-chun. However, they, who had always been successful, suffered a big loss in front of Yin Fei-chun. It was also the first time that the 10th realm had won against the conquerors of other realms. However, the cross-boundary masters who came to the 10th realm soon discovered that there were only more than 1,000 number plates in total. More than 800 of them were in Yi Shiwen's hands. In other words, even if they fought fiercely, Yi Shiwen could eliminate all of them as long as he wanted. Although he could only occupy one position, if he distributed a few more number plates to the others, then their efforts would be in vain, and they would all be in vain. This was also the fundamental reason why the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders wanted to collect the number plates no matter what. As long as most of the number plates were in their hands, they could not overturn the heavens no matter what. However, he didn't expect that it would benefit Yi Shiwen in the end, giving him the ability to control the quota. After realizing this point, they were completely dumbfounded. They wouldn't be able to compete with Yi Shiwen unless they could snatch the remaining hundreds of Yi Shiwen. In other words, they had to work themselves to death, and in the end, they still had to look at Yi Shiwen's mood. Yi Shiwen could make them spiral if he was unhappy. How could these proud Heaven's Pride level experts accept this? At that time, in the face of their provocations, there would be no other news about Yi Shiwen at all. It was as if he had disappeared. If they didn't know that they couldn't leave the 10 worlds for hegemony in advance, they would even suspect that Yi Shiwen had already left the 10th world because it was useless to look for him. Even Yin Fei-chun had been found, but there was no news about Yi Shiwen. This made many people who wanted to find trouble with him completely dumbfounded. Since you want to be a coward, then let us force you out. After Lei Jingxuan said this, he and a few other experts who had crossed over to this world started killing everywhere. In the beginning, they were only fighting for number tags, but now, they were purely killing for the sake of killing. For a time, the 10th world was filled with a bloody storm. Many geniuses didn't have time to react and were directly beheaded on the spot. Moreover, Lei Jingxuan said that if Yi Shiwen continued to be a coward, then they would continue to kill until everyone was killed. At that time, no one else would compete with them, and they would naturally level up. Although this idea was obviously just a threat, because these were the Heaven's Pride level experts who represented the big shots among the individual cultivators. Even the Marquis clan couldn't offend so many individual cultivators in one go. If that happened, even these Marquis clan would be unable to move an inch and would eventually decline under the anger of everyone. But even so, it was already enough to make countless people panic. Because even if their killing would stop, they didn't know when it would stop, and they didn't know if they could last until the day these people stopped killing. Therefore, under this terrifying coercion, many people began to spontaneously look for Yi Shiwen. Even many people began to complain about Yi Shiwen. If it weren't for him, they wouldn't have been slaughtered like this. As for looking for trouble with those experts who came from different worlds, they obviously didn't have the guts to do so. Under such circumstances, Zhu Yi directly stood up and challenged Lei Jingxuan. As soon as this news came out, it immediately caused a sensation in the 10th world. Now that the experts from different worlds joined forces to slaughter, even experts like Wei Tianxiang automatically went into hiding and didn't dare to compete with them. Although Yin Feichen won a battle, he didn't continue to stand up. Under such circumstances, Zhu Ye's actions immediately attracted the attention of countless people. Hundreds of top experts all went to the valley where the battle was arranged. Of the 1,000 or so people who had entered the trial, after being slaughtered by the 13 Ironblood Eagle Cavalry and the experts from across realms, as well as some of them killing each other, there were now less than 800 people left. Most of them had their number tags stolen, and unless there was a miracle, the 10 spots in the 10th realm would no longer have much to do with them. Will he come? He will definitely come. Many people knew that they might be slaughtered by those experts from different worlds, but they still went to watch the battle. It was rumored that Yi Shiwen would appear. This was because many people knew that Yi Shiwen and Zhu Yi had a good relationship. At this time, this was also the only opportunity that Yi Shiwen might appear. He should come. This barbarian has enemies everywhere, but he only has a good relationship with Yi Shiwen. That's true. Both of them are troublemakers. Only such people would share the same rotten tastes. I think so too. If they had come, perhaps there would have been a fierce battle between giants. This Zhu Yi is a barbarian who causes trouble everywhere, and Yi Shiwen is not bad either. The 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry were very powerful, but in the end, they still died tragically at the hands of Yi Shiwen. In the valley where the battle was arranged, there was a hubbub of voices. On top of the cliff, Zhu Ye's tall figure sat down and looked straight ahead. Below the valley, countless experts had gathered. For them, there was a sense of security when so many people gathered together. Brother Yi, they probably don't know that you are already among them. Among the crowd, a young man in a green shirt and a very cute girl beside him said with a smile. It was Yi Shiwen and Green Luo. Just as they thought, Yi Shiwen might not come out at all for other people. However, when it involved Zhu Yi, he decided to come out and have a look. This was one of the few friends he had in the 10th world. Since the death of Sun Zisher and Lu Zifan had a huge impact on her, she seemed to have grown up overnight. She refused to call Yi Shiwen by his full name, but called him Brother Yi. During this time, when the outside was in an uproar, he did not show up and let the outside world be a bloody mess. In fact, even those experts who came from different worlds passed by the valley where Yi Shiwen was in closed-door training several times. However, they did not find Yi Shiwen using the restraining breath technique. However, some problems could not be avoided forever. They still had to be solved. Therefore, he came out. Roar! In the distance, a long roar reverberated in all directions. Many mountains crumbled in response, distorting the void. A terrifying figure stepped through the void, heading towards the valley, accompanied by countless bolts of lightning that shot up into the sky. Lei Jingxuan is here, someone exclaimed. This aura covered the sky and covered the earth. It was like a vast ocean sweeping over, and the whole sky was trembling. This was the powerful battle prowess of the peak of the fifth heaven of the heaven realm. Even in the ancient, desolate era, such an expert could already be ranked among the experts. It's really Lei Jingxuan. He's too strong. Some of the weaker experts, who were only half-step into the peak of the celestial realm, felt the powerful pressure at this time and could not help but tremble. Although these people belonged to the weakest group of people here, their battle prowess was enough to contend against ordinary celestial realm experts. Naturally, they had their own pride, but under this terrifying pressure, they completely trembled. Even the others could feel a strong pressure coming from him. And at this moment, a sudden change occurred. A powerful wave of spirit chi shot up into the sky, forming a powerful formation in the sky. In an instant, Lei Jingxuan was trapped within it. A gigantic figure appeared, towering between the heavens and the earth, incomparably powerful. Lei Jingxuan, ever since you entered the 10th world, you have committed countless evil deeds. Today, we will get rid of you for the sake of the people. A buzzing voice came from the huge voice, like that of a demon god. Many people were horrified. They did not expect that someone would dare to intercept Lei Jingxuan here. Moreover, they took advantage of this opportunity to set up a matrix in advance, wanting to capture Lei Jingxuan in one go. Everyone held their breath and looked at Lei Jingxuan in the matrix. For them, Lei Jingxuan was also one of the butchers who wantonly slaughtered people. Many people also hated him to the bone. However, after the previous waves of ambushes failed, they did not expect that someone would still have the courage to do so. Everyone was very nervous, but they also hoped that they could succeed. Just a group of chickens and dogs. How dare you clamor in front of me? Chapter 1502. It's just a bunch of chickens and dogs. How dare you clamor in front of me? Lei Jingxuan's blue robe fluttered. A firefly wants to compete with the bright moon? Lei Jingxuan did not move. Thunder and lightning danced around him like a thunder god. Don't be too proud. The gigantic figure roared furiously and punched out. Boundless energy surged out like a surging river and swept out. This was like a doomsday disaster. It swept out and the sky collapsed. It was very powerful. With just you guys? Lei Jingxuan sneered. He spread out a big hand and countless thunder and lightning power swept out, eventually scattering into the void. Boom! Countless thunder and lightning power instantly blasted the long river of energy that the huge figure had blasted out, and it directly collapsed on the spot. The three void. Swish! Lei Jingxuan made a move. His figure suddenly moved like a bolt of lightning and instantly rushed in front of the huge figure. He stretched out a big hand and grabbed the huge figure. Rip! A loud tearing sound was heard. A figure was pulled out of the figure on the spot. It was an expert at the peak of the 4th level of the celestial realm. Among the rogue cultivators, it was enough to dominate. But at this time, in Lei Jingxuan's hands, he was like a little chick that was pulled out casually. He was seriously injured on the spot. The bones in his body were broken, shattered by the powerful force, and his flesh and blood flew. Puff! He directly spat out a mouthful of blood. As the figure was pulled out, the huge figure instantly collapsed with a loud bang. This huge figure was only formed by relying on the formation. It had the terrifying strength of the 5th heaven of the celestial realm. Originally, they thought that they could use such a formation to get rid of Lei Jingxuan. Who would have thought that it would be so terrifying? It was instantly destroyed by Lei Jingxuan. After this figure collapsed, 2 figures jumped out. They were 2 top experts at the peak of the 4th level of the celestial realm. The moment these 2 people jumped out, they immediately rushed towards Lei Jingxuan. 2 amazing sword lights hung in the void like 2 rivers of stars, falling towards Lei Jingxuan. The 2 huge sword lights formed a huge vortex in the void. Break for me! Lei Jingxuan stretched out his arm and punched out. His punch was mixed with a thunderstorm, instantly blasting out. The 2 rays of sword light were instantly destroyed, and the 2 men were instantly hit by the power of thunder. Their bodies immediately split into pieces and exploded, and blood splattered everywhere. You want to ambush me with just these people? What an idiot! Lei Jingxuan said with a sneer. With a loud shout, the big formation around him collapsed with a loud bang. The sky was falling and the earth cracked. And the 2 people were not Lei Jingxuan's match at all. Everyone was shocked. Lei Jingxuan was a rarely seen expert in the 4th layer of the sky human realm among the loose cultivators. Yet he was killed so easily. It was simply terrifying. Lei Jingxuan's terrifying strength caused everyone to tremble in fear. Everyone had only heard about the previous ambushes and hadn't seen it with their own eyes. But this time, they had seen it with their own eyes. 3 top-notch geniuses were easily killed without the slightest hesitation. The reason for their failure could be seen at this moment. After breaking the formation, Lei Jingxuan did not even look at them. He directly rushed in front of Ju Yi. "Barbarian, you are very courageous. You actually dare to challenge me. Then, obediently come and accept your death." Lei Jingxuan's voice was like a thunderclap, crazily sweeping outside. The whole sky was shaking crazily, faintly distorting. Lei Jingxuan flew in the sky, stepping on thunder dragons. He was like a god of thunder, extremely terrifying. With his strength, he could casually blow up the sky. Ju Yi, who was standing on the mountain wall, did not give an inch. He coldly looked at Lei Jingxuan, and a powerful aura also erupted from his body. It shattered the void, and a wild aura swept out. The two of them finally fought. Countless people were looking forward to this day. One represented the experts among rogue cultivators, and the other was the supreme genius of the Ho clan. The fight between the two of them was given special meaning. "I heard that you are causing trouble for Yi Xuan everywhere," Ju Yi said with a grin. "But your methods are a bit too despicable. He has most of the number tags in his hands, and is also a turtle hiding in its shell. How can we force him out without some special methods?" Lei Jingxuan said. "If he really has the appearance of a man, he should obediently come out and accept our challenge now. Don't think that you are already invincible in the world. In the end, you are just a group of losers competing in other worlds," Ju Yi said without any trace of politeness. "Humph. You want to rely on this to break my state of mind?" Lei Jingxuan sneered and said, "Perhaps there is someone who can defeat me, but that person is definitely not you. With trash like you, there is absolutely no way you can defeat me." Yi Xuan looked from afar. The aura of the two people in the sky was extremely terrifying. They were genuine experts of the 5th level of the celestial realm. Although the formation of the three people just now was very ingenious, and the three of them could actually combine the strength of the 5th level of the celestial realm, but in the end, they were not the true 5th level of the celestial realm. There was a world of difference between them and the two of them. Compared to before, Ju Ye's aura had become much stronger. During this period of time, it was obvious that he also had a fortuitous encounter. Otherwise, he would not have been able to break into the 5th level of the celestial realm in one fell swoop. In the celestial realm, every step was like ascending to the heavens. Although these geniuses were advancing very quickly, it did not mean that it was not difficult. "Take this first move of mine." Lei Jingxuan waved his hand, and suddenly, countless lightning condensed in the sky above him, forming a huge thunder dragon that pounced towards Ju Yi. The huge thunder dragon instantly flew out, and wherever it passed, the void shattered. "Only this degree of deterioration, but you can't defeat me," Ju Yi sneered, and the mace in his hand suddenly moved. A loud and sharp sound pierced through the air, and the space between heaven and earth trembled. The mace directly smashed the thunder dragon into pieces. "If this is all you've got, then go to hell." The mace in Ju Ye's hand carried a power that made people despair, and it rushed down horizontally. The power could overturn rivers and seas, and it was extremely terrifying. At this time, Lei Jingxuan's expression finally changed slightly. His whole body was blasted away on the spot. The terrifying power hit his body, and it was difficult for him to resist. His figure glided in the sky for more than 1,000 meters before coming to a stop. At this time, the way he looked at Ju Yi changed slightly. This barbarian didn't have any other abilities. Just this terrifying power alone was enough for him to have a place among the 5th heaven of the celestial realm. However, Lei Jingxuan was only shocked for a moment. Then, he waved his hands and countless thunder dragons appeared in the sky. A layer of clouds vaguely formed in the sky, covering the void. These thunder dragons appeared in the clouds. It was a spectacular scene. People could feel a terrifying pressure sweeping down. Although it couldn't be compared to the heavenly might of the heavenly tribulation, it was already very amazing for a person to emit such a terrifying pressure. Although it couldn't compare to the heavenly might of the heavenly tribulation, it was already very amazing for a person to emit such a terrifying pressure. Walla! 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 Countless thunder dragons seemed to be attracted by something, and they fiercely fell from the sky, instantly sealing the void, and directly bombarded Zhu Ye's body. Rumble! The entire valley was blown to pieces in an instant. Many people in the valley were instantly seriously injured and fled out of the valley. They were completely implicated, but it was useless to say that at this time. The entire valley within a radius of 1,000 meters was instantly razed to the ground. This kind of attack is too terrifying. He will be seriously injured no matter what. Many people couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat when they saw such a powerful attack. "Eat my mace!" With a loud shout, a figure rushed out. A huge mace soared into the sky and smashed down fiercely towards Lei Jingxuan. Bang! Lei Jingxuan was not prepared at all, and he was blasted away on the spot. The thunder and lightning dissipated, revealing Zhu Ye's figure. His body was bleeding profusely, and his flesh was torn by the thunder dragons. Some parts of his body were even showing his bones. He was constantly panting. He was also seriously injured by the thunder dragons. On the other side, Lei Jingxuan barely stabilized his mind in the void. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Zhu Ye's mace had directly shaken his internal organs and caused him to bleed. This power was too strong. In this fight, both sides were injured, and no one was able to gain an advantage. Yi Shiwen frowned, feeling a little strange. The fight just now seemed to be a lose-lose situation, but it wasn't the case in the eyes of experts. Lei Jingxuan had already used all his means, but Zhu Yi was only relying on the strength of his body to resist. It was the same last time. With Zhu Ye's amazing combat power, he was actually fooled by an illusion array. Generally speaking, even if one couldn't see through it, one could easily break it. Just like Yi Shiwen previously, but he didn't see it at all. If one's mental strength was slightly stronger, they wouldn't be like this, but Zhu Yi was fooled. This was not normal at all. Chapter 1503. Generally, when a warrior's realm improved, all aspects of their abilities would also improve at the same time. Everyone had their own strengths, and the degree of improvement was also different. However, in any case, it should not be like Zhu Ye's. His realm seems to be sealed by something. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and said, "Die!" Lei Jingxuan forcibly suppressed all kinds of discomfort in his body. His eyes were bloodshot, and his aura soared to the sky. Countless thunder dragons began to revolve around his body again. "You dare to hurt me? Today is the day you die." Lei Jingxuan stepped into the void, and a thunder dragon appeared in the sky. It covered the sky and covered the earth. Lei Jingxuan's current strength was much stronger than before. "Then come on, I'm looking for a hearty battle like this." Zhu Yi roared, and the mace in his hand instantly danced and fiercely smashed towards the thunder dragon. Boom! 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 Both sides were like two gods of war, constantly entangled in the void, fighting from the ground all the way to the sky. Both of them could not do anything to the other. It was terrifying. Both sides fought for a long time, but no one could do anything to the other. Although Zhu Yi was lagging behind in other aspects, his strength was really terrifying. It was as if he had given up everything else to strengthen his strength. This kind of unconventional sword style was ridiculously strong. "Zhu Yi, you're quite a character. I have a whole new level of respect for someone like you among the rogue cultivators. However, this is the end of it." Lei Jingxuan roared. "You're qualified for me to use my strongest technique against you." Lei Jingxuan growled, and the endless power of lightning surged around his body. Countless lightning dragons roared and rushed down from the sky. However, they didn't rush in Zhu Ye's direction. Instead, they rushed towards Lei Jingxuan. Boom! 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 These thunder dragons instantly turned into endless thunder power and blasted into Lei Jingxuan's body. His entire body was submerged in the thunder dragons, and no one could see his figure. Under this move of mine, all you can do is die. At this time, Lei Jingxuan roared, and endless thunder power instantly gathered. Ancient thunder cannon. Above his head, the shape of a cannon formed on the spot, and endless lightning energy penetrated into his body. Boom! The lightning turned into a huge cannonball and blasted out. In an instant, a huge torrent of energy swept out on the spot. In an instant, the torrent of energy had already arrived in front of Ju Yi. Everywhere it passed, the void instantly turned into powder. It was unable to withstand the terrifying force that brushed past it. Ju Yi roared, and an endless amount of brute force emanated from his body. It was like a barbaric painting scroll that blocked in front of him. Boom! An incomparable voice rang out. Everyone felt as if this voice had drowned out all other sounds. Heaven and earth lost all other colors, leaving only the color of the tears that filled the sky. He didn't know how much time had passed. It felt like a second, but it also felt like a century. Everyone struggled to open their eyes in the bright light, but they saw that the void was filled with cracks that were opening and closing in the sky. It was extremely terrifying. In the air, Lei Jingxuan was constantly panting, but there was a smile on his face. On the other side, Zhu Ye's figure appeared in front of everyone. He was in an abnormally sorry state, and the arms that he had used to protect his body were a bloody mess. They had completely collapsed, and the bones of his hands could be seen. Apart from his hands, there was not a single piece of flesh on his body that was unharmed, and blood was flowing everywhere. After a long silence, someone finally asked, "Is this the outcome of the battle decided?" They didn't expect the battle to be so intense. The power possessed by both sides was enough to shock them, and they felt fear from the bottom of their hearts. Boom! The moment he spoke, Zhu Ye's figure directly fell from the void and slammed into the ground, creating a huge crack. In the end, I still won. Lei Jingxuan laughed loudly. He opened his palm, and the power of thunder and lightning condensed. Whoosh! This power of thunder and lightning instantly pierced through the sky and went straight towards Ju Yi. It wanted to take advantage of the fact that he was seriously injured to kill him. Although he had finally won against Ju Yi, his fear of Ju Yi had deepened. Yi Shiwen could see that something was strange, but could he not? He could also see that there was something strange about this. This barbarian could actually fight against him to such an extent with just his physical body. Although he didn't know where his other abilities were, once he was allowed to erupt, it would be a great disaster for him. Since he had already offended him, he might as well let him die. Only a dead enemy was the best enemy. Suddenly, a huge golden hand broke through the void and appeared in front of Ju Yi in an instant. It crushed the bolt of lightning into a ball of energy and forcefully absorbed it. Oh! Lei Jingxuan's eyes revealed a bit of vigilance. Although he had suffered serious injuries, he was still a terrifying enemy to be able to approach him undetected. "Are you looking for me?" A green figure appeared in the void. "Yi Shiwen, it's Yi Shiwen." Some people recognized Yi Shiwen's silhouette almost immediately. His attire was too conspicuous, so many people couldn't hide it at all. Moreover, Yi Shiwen didn't intend to hide it at all. "You're Yi Shiwen?" At this time, Lei Jingxuan's eyes flashed with a somewhat fearful look. If he was at his peak, even if Yi Shiwen could appear, he was confident that he could kill him directly. But now, he was seriously injured, and he had encountered Yi Shiwen whose strength was unknown. Lei Jingxuan was simply adding insult to injury. Yi Shiwen only glanced at him and immediately guessed what he was thinking. He couldn't help but sneer and say, "Don't worry, I won't take advantage of you, because you don't deserve it. You." Lei Jingxuan suddenly became angry. He didn't pay much attention to Yi Shiwen, but he didn't expect that Yi Shiwen was even more arrogant than him. He actually looked down on him, which made him feel extremely angry. If it was in normal times, he would immediately attack Yi Shiwen, but now he was not at his peak state. Moreover, Yi Shiwen's attack just now had also surprised him. He could only suppress the anger in his heart and said coldly, "You finally appeared. I thought you were going to be a turtle hiding in its shell forever. In order to force me out, you can say that you have done your best," Yi Shiwen said indifferently. "But today, I want to tell you that a loser will always be a loser. He won't become a winner just because he changed places." For Yi Shiwen, no matter how powerful these people were, no matter how nice their words were, a loser was a loser. There was no need to hide because there was no use in hiding. "I will wait here today. Everyone who wants a number plate or wants my head, feel free to try. I will wait for everyone to come, Yi Shiwen said indifferently. Suddenly, the people below were in an uproar. What was domineering? This was domineering. What was domineering? This was domineering. Although these people were all losers in Yi Shiwen's words, they were undoubtedly the best. Even in other realms, they might not be weak. Even for powerhouses like Zhu Yi and Yin Feichen, it was already very strong to face one of them. However, Yi Shiwen's intention was to wait for them to come together. What kind of courage was this? How bold! No wonder he actually dared to attack the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders and succeeded in replacing them. Many people's blood was boiling. Although Yi Shiwen was not a rogue cultivator, in any case, he had also passed through the layers of selection in the 10th realm. Most importantly, in any case, Yi Shiwen was much more pleasing to the eye than these cross-realm masters who only knew how to kill. Well, let me see how capable you are, Lei Jingxuan said fiercely. He immediately sat cross-legged in the void to recover. Although he was still a little vigilant against Yi Shiwen, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he believed that Yi Shiwen would not act recklessly. These people could kill indiscriminately, but they would not speak carelessly. As the saying goes, food can be eaten indiscriminately, but words cannot be spoken indiscriminately. These Heaven's Pride experts had their own pride. He believed that Yi Shiwen was the same. Yi Shiwen did not pay attention to him at all. He landed directly on the ground and pressed one hand on Zhu Ye's body. The Phoenix regeneration technique immediately ran in his body, and a phoenix cry came. The serious injuries on Zhu Ye's body recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. In just a quarter of an hour, Zhu Ye's terrible injuries that were originally fatal had almost recovered. At this time, Lei Jingxuan, whose injuries were much lighter than Zhu Ye's, had just recovered. The difference between the two sides in terms of the healing technique was already clear. Brother, it's all thanks to you this time. Otherwise, this body of mine might have been lost here, Zhu Yi said with a smile. His face was a little pale. Although his injuries had recovered, there was no way to replenish the essence he had consumed in a short time. His combat strength could not be restored to the peak in a short time. In the end, your participation in this battle is still related to me. How can I just stand by and watch? Yi Shiwen said. Words cannot express my gratitude. Zhu Yi grinned. He was very clear who was good to him. What's the matter? Those hiding in the sky, are you still not going to show yourselves? Yi Shiwen shouted loudly. Chapter 1504. What? There's someone else? Everyone was shocked that there were still people hiding in the sky. Some people trembled, but they didn't notice at all. At this time, in the void, many tyrannical figures appeared. The powerful aura stirred the clouds in the sky, and thunder and lightning constantly rolled. At a glance, there were dozens of them, and all of them were experts at the peak of the 4th level of the heaven realm or above. All the loose cultivators understood that these experts who had crossed realms had arrived. Among the loose cultivators, other than Zhu Yi and a few other monstrous geniuses, there were very few experts at the 4th level of the sky human realm. Moreover, most of them had died in the previous battles. As the 4th level of the heaven realm, their strength was not the strongest, but they were very dazzling among the individual cultivators, and they were the first targets of these cross-border experts. What made everyone even more frightened was that, in addition to these dozens of experts at the 4th level of the heaven realm, the 4 leading people had already stepped into the 5th level of the heaven realm, and a terrifying aura swept out, enveloping the entire valley. Everyone was alarmed and looked at the sky one after another. There were even more quick-witted people who had already figured out that with so many people gathered together, they couldn't be here for an outing, right? Then the target was already very clear. It was Yi Shiwen. To be able to make these proud cross-border experts, the top experts of the marquis and royal families move together, it wasn't even Yi Shiwen, but the number plate in his hand. I didn't expect you to see through it. At this time, among the 4 people in the void, a handsome young man said with a cold smile. His body was like a dream, making it hard for people to see him clearly. Someone recognized him. He was a disciple of the Phantom Moon sect, Li Tianlang. His illusory technique had already reached the pinnacle. Do you think you can hide so well? Yi Shiwen said with a sneer. You should be Li Tianlang, so Li Tianyun is my brother. Li Tianlang said lightly. Li Tianyun didn't die in my hands. He died in the hands of the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders. Come to think of it, I have avenged him. Yi Shiwen said with a smile. You want me to let you go? He's just a useless younger brother. If he dies, then so be it. But if you don't hand over your number plate, today will be the day you die. Li Tianlang coldly said. He wasn't moved by Yi Shiwen's words at all. His voice was incomparably cold. This number plate was the pass to enter the imperial court. After entering the imperial court, one would be nurtured as a top heavens pride expert. After coming out, one would become a tycoon that could shake a region. Compared to this, the death of a younger brother was nothing. Trash younger brother. You are really ruthless, but in fact, in my opinion, you're not much better than your so-called trash younger brother. Yi Shiwen clicked his tongue and said, Yi Shiwen, don't talk nonsense. Hand over your number plate. Your Yi clan is also one of the 28 marquee clans. Why do you want to team up with them? I heard that even the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders were killed by you. Just based on this, you have the qualifications to stand side by side with us. When the time comes, you won't miss out on a spot in the top 10, so why bother? At this time, a 30-year-old man in a magnificent robe stood up and looked at Yi Shiwen and said, around his body, there seemed to be a bright moon rising and falling at any time, giving off an unimaginable might. Who are you? Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and asked. Bright moon cult, bright sky cliff. The young man in magnificent robe proudly said. Everyone held their breath. This was another terrifying expert of the Marquee clan. Bright Moon Cult was one of the 28 Marquee clans. It was also a powerful and prosperous sect with countless experts. What about you? Yi Shiwen turned to look at another young man who was about 27 or 28 years old. He saw this young man standing with a sword on his back. His sword aura soared into the sky, faintly forming a kingdom of swordsmanship around him. Black Tortoise Sword Faction, Chiu Fei Bai. The young man with a sword on his back said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner. The Black Tortoise Sword Faction was a famous sword cultivator of the human race. Although their comprehensive strength was not the strongest among the Marquee clans, but facing the Marquee clans with their outstanding destructive power, not many people wanted to deal with them. At this time, Yi Shiwen's gaze turned to the last tall and strong man. This was a body cultivator. Yi Shiwen almost instantly determined that the vitality of his body was truly vigorous and terrifying. It was not much worse than Zhu Yi. Sunluo clan, Sunluo how? The tall and strong man spoke in a low and muffled voice. He was extremely arrogant and did not care about Yi Shiwen at all. Very good. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and said, Ta-ta. 2 footsteps sounded. Zhu Yi walked to Yi Shiwen's side, wanting to fight side by side with him. Don't worry, these stinky fish and shrimps don't need your help. Yi Shiwen looked at Zhu Yi and said with a smile. Zhu Yi saw Yi Shiwen like this and did not insist. Instead, he said, if that's the case, then I won't say anything more. If you need me, just give me a shout. Even if it's a mountain of blades or a sea of flames, it won't be a problem. After saying this, Zhu Yi retreated to the side. However, he still held the mace in his hand tightly. He wanted to recover a little more so that when Yi Shiwen needed him, he could be the first to act. Yi Shiwen, it seems that you refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. You're determined to go against us. Li Tianlang said coldly. If that's the case, then don't blame us for not considering our friendship as fellow Marquee clans. Friendship? Haha, what a joke. The number plate is in my hand. If you want it, then come and get it, Yi Shiwen said with a sneer. Wasn't it too ridiculous to talk about friendship at this time? What are you guys waiting for? Hurry up and kill him. At this time, another cold voice came from the void. The voice was deep like thunder, but it made everyone tremble in an instant. At this time, a figure slowly appeared in the void. It was an ordinary-looking young man who looked about 25 or 26 years old. He was dressed in ordinary clothes, and his eyes were as deep as the universe. It was impossible to see through them. Yishuan's expression finally became serious. This was an expert who could bring him great pressure. His instincts told him that this was an extremely powerful opponent. Zhu Yi, who was not far from him, could not help but feel a little nervous. This was a situation that had never happened when he faced other experts. It could be seen that this young man was giving him great pressure. There's no other way, Yishuan. Originally, we still had a chance to talk. However, since this person has spoken, you definitely won't have a chance. Ming Tianya said, "It doesn't matter. Do you guys want to come one by one or together?" Yishuan tilted his head and said, "Together?" Yishuan, you don't have the ability. At this time, Sun Luo Hao stepped forward. Just my summoned beast alone can defeat you. As he spoke, the void in front of him fluctuated. A huge claw came from the void at an extremely fast speed, instantly grabbing towards Yishuan. However, Yishuan's speed was even faster. He stepped on the void, and his body instantly moved hundreds of meters backward, narrowly avoiding the claw attack. He looked into the void and saw a huge figure shuttling out of it. It was a ferocious tiger with scales all over its body. It was more than 100 meters long and looked like a small mountain as it crawled out of the void. "What kind of monster is this? It's so scary," someone exclaimed. "I didn't expect Sun Luo Hao's summoned beast to be so tyrannical. This Yishuan is in trouble. There are at least a few people here who are not inferior to him, including that unfathomable young man." That huge, ferocious tiger stared at Yishuan with its lantern-like huge eyes and coldly looked at him. Roar! This ferocious tiger faced upwards and let out a long and loud roar. It then rushed towards Yishuan. Its four claws tore open an astonishing crack in the void. It took a long time for the crack to heal. The world shook as if it had received a huge impact. This ferocious tiger hadn't arrived in front of Yishuan yet. It opened its bloody mouth, and a powerful energy transformed into a huge cannonball. It swept across the sky and dragged a huge crack in the space as it rushed towards Yishuan. Many people held their breath and ran away. They dared not imagine how terrible the scene would be if such an attack was aimed at them. Perhaps more than half of the hundreds of people here would be vaporized in one breath. "Brother Yi!" In the crowd, Qing Luo clasped her hands together as if she was praying to the heavens. Her complexion changed drastically in the face of such a powerful attack. In her opinion, Yishuan was indeed very strong, but it was impossible for him to remain indifferent in the face of such an attack. Zhu Yi, who was at the forefront of the crowd, was the most direct. He held the mace in his hand tightly, ready to help Yishuan at any time. "Humph!" Yishuan snorted coldly. He clenched his 5 fingers into a fist and punched out. In an instant, a golden wave blasted out and swept up. Boom! The most terrifying collision sound came, and the entire void seemed to have collapsed completely. This was the collision of two amazing forces. Endless energy turned into ripples, like ripples, sweeping out in circles. Many people were forced back again by this powerful momentum. They could not help but retreat again and again. This force was too strong. Suddenly, someone cried out in alarm. They saw that the huge body of that ferocious tiger tore apart the turbulent flow of energy in an instant. It took advantage of the chaos and clawed towards Yishuan. Its speed was as fast as lightning. It formed a huge contrast with its huge body. Fast, fast, fast. This claw was extremely fast, but Yishuan didn't seem to be prepared at all and let this claw grab in front of him. Just when this claw was about to crush Yishuan's head, Yishuan suddenly moved. Boom! The momentum on his body exploded and swept out. His eyes suddenly opened like a flash of lightning. He clenched his 5 fingers into a fist, and the golden wave suddenly dispersed. Chapter 1505. Yishuan's 5 fingers clenched into a fist. His fist exuded a golden light, which formed a wave that swept out. At the critical moment when the fierce tiger was about to grab his head, he blasted it out. Fast! 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 Boom! A loud roar sounded. Yi Shiwen's fist penetrated through layers of space and landed on the huge head of the fierce tiger. If the speed of this fierce tiger was so fast that everyone's eyes couldn't see it, then Yi Shiwen's speed was several times faster than it. The ferocious tiger let out a blood-curdling screech as its huge body was sent flying. It flew upside down like a cannonball and crashed into many mountain peaks before it tumbled down. Suddenly, everyone was shocked. Was he still a human? He could actually send a fierce beast flying with his bare hands. In the aftermath of the explosion, Yi Shiwen's cyan clothes fluttered like a god of war. Yi Shiwen's intrepidity had thoroughly shocked all the onlookers in the vicinity. It wasn't that they hadn't seen an incomparably intrepid body, but they had never seen such an intrepid body that could send such a ferocious demon beast flying with just one punch. It was fast and accurate. He had sent the fierce tiger flying with just one punch. Such combat power was simply frightening. However, for those individual cultivators, this undoubtedly made their blood boil. Although Yi Shiwen's movements were simple and direct, without too many fancy moves, it gave people the illusion that their blood was boiling. This kind of fist-to-flesh combat could make people's blood boil the most. The ferocious tiger that had been blasted away quickly pounced towards Yi Shiwen again. Its physical strength was also extremely terrifying. It opened its ferocious mouth and continuously spouted energy beams. These energy beams swept out like a hail of bullets. The sky was filled with the terrifying scene of the energy cannons it had spat out. It rushed towards Yi Shiwen while spitting out energy cannons. Yi Shiwen sneered. This beast was really reckless. At this time, Yi Shiwen moved. He took a step forward, and the entire sky shook. It was even more terrifying than the fierce tiger's attack. Looking from afar, it was like a humanoid, fierce beast. The world changed color because of it. Many experts in the distance saw this scene, and their faces changed. Whoosh! Yi Shiwen's figure flashed in the void and arrived in front of that fierce tiger in an instant. A trace of fear flashed in the eyes of that fierce tiger, but it was already too late. Shattering star fist. Yi Shiwen clenched his 5 fingers into a fist, and a golden wave spread out, forming a huge star and fiercely smashed into the body of this fierce tiger. Bang! The ferocious tiger was blasted away on the spot, and a huge hole was blasted in its body. Flesh and blood flew everywhere, and the scene was extremely terrifying. But at this time, Yi Shiwen once again caught up with him and punched again. Stop! At this time, Sun Luo Hao finally thought of attacking, but how could he keep up with Yi Shiwen's speed? Almost in an instant, he blasted out hundreds of punches. Bang! 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 There was a deafening sound, and this fierce tiger was smashed to death by Yi Shiwen. It was directly smashed into meat paste, and its blood essence was also absorbed by Tianyuan mirror. Everyone was dumbfounded and foolishly looked at the scene in front of them. That incomparably ferocious tiger had been killed by Yi Shiwen. It was too terrifying. Yi Shiwen had killed it with his fists and turned it into a pile of meat paste. Yi Shiwen's strength was simply shocking. This was even more terrifying than a direct defeat. This was a crushing of absolute strength, and there was no room for compromise. This was a pure crushing, and many people saw this scene, and they were horrified. This fierce tiger had undoubtedly entered the 5th level of Celestial Realm, but in Yi Shiwen's hands, it was casually cleaned up like garbage. This made everyone remember how Yi Shiwen defeated the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Cavalry previously, and it seemed that he defeated them in such a simple manner. You're courting death. At this time, Sun Luo Hao was simply furious. In order to cultivate this summoned beast, he had spent a lot of effort, and only he himself knew. But now, it was directly smashed into meat paste by Yi Shiwen. Ah, how could he not be angry? As for the words that his summoned beast could also defeat Yi Shiwen and so on, it was simply forgotten. Whoosh! Sun Luo Hao instantly rushed out, and a terrifying heavy sword appeared in his hand, and in an instant he slashed down. Crash! Yi Shiwen's body instantly turned into a golden universe, and at this moment, he became the only life in this universe, extremely tyrannical. At this time, His heavy sword was about to slash Yi Shiwen's head, and at this time, Yi Shiwen finally moved. His speed was extremely fast, and in an instant his golden fist blasted out golden divine waves, and countless laws manifested, and fell on Sunluo Hao's heavy sword with irresistible force. Clang! Yi Shiwen's fist blasted on the heavy sword, making a sound like metal colliding, and the entire heavy sword began to buzz incessantly. A somewhat horrified look flashed across Sunluo Hao's face. A terrifying force directly shook his body through the heavy sword, and his entire arm began to tremble slightly. And while he had always been known for his physical cultivation, his entire palm holding the heavy sword completely cracked and was badly mutilated. He almost couldn't even hold the heavy sword in his hand, and it was sent flying. How is this possible, such a strong physical cultivation? How could Yi Shiwen have such a tyrannical body cultivation? Even the famous Sunluo clan, which specialized in body cultivation, couldn't be so terrifying, let alone that barbarian. The barbarian race was also famous for their tyrannical bodies. He had just seen Zhu Yi resist Lei Jingxuan's means with his body, but he was sure that even Zhu Ye's body wasn't as terrifying as Yi Shiwen's. It was as if he had encountered the legendary Dragon Clan. Whoosh! Yi Shiwen's offensive was far from stopping, and in an instant he blasted another punch, and the surging fist force shook all directions. Sunluo Hao hurriedly retreated, and as he did so, the cracked wound on his hand healed completely, and his arm no longer trembled. Sunluo Hao, can you do it? Didn't you boast that your physical cultivation was invincible? What is this? Li Tianlang sneered at this time. Although he and Sunluo Hao were temporary partners, it did not mean that they had a good relationship. In fact, the martial arts practiced by the two could be considered to have gone to two extremes. The martial arts of the Sunluo clan were known for their physical strength, and they advocated that one could defeat 10 with one's physical strength. As long as one had a strong physical strength, everything else was fleeting. But Li Tianlang was different. The Phantom Moon sect was known for their mental strength, and their illusion technique was unparalleled in the world. They could even be ranked as one of the 28 marquee clans because of this. One could imagine that their illusion technique had reached the pinnacle. Due to the extreme difference in ideology between the two sides, there was no small grudge between them. Damn it, mind your own business. Sunluo Hao roared, and the heavy sword in his hand slashed out again. It was like a heavy mountain, and it slashed down with a loud bang. The void was instantly split in half, and it directly slashed towards Yi Shiwen's face. Sunluo Hao was furious, and this sword directly slashed through the void, surpassing time. The sword chi directly formed a huge ferocious beast, opened its bloody mouth, and directly rushed towards Yi Shiwen. In the beginning, he still somewhat underestimated Yi Shiwen, and thought that he could deal with Yi Shiwen. But now, he did not dare to underestimate Yi Shiwen anymore. He attacked with all his strength, and it was a one-hit kill. He was extremely fast, but Yi Shiwen was even faster. He clenched his 5 fingers into a fist and blasted out another punch. There was nothing fancy about it, and it only blasted out a monstrous golden wave. No matter what kind of tricks you have, I can only break them with one punch. This ferocious beast condensed from the sword chi was instantly destroyed, and the fist blasted on the heavy sword again. Clang! Another extremely terrifying roar sounded. Both sides attacked with all their strength, and it was even more terrifying than the previous exchange. Buzz! The heavy sword madly clanged, and Sunluo Hao's arm also trembled crazily, and the terrible power raged on his entire arm. Swish! The entire heavy sword was blasted away on the spot, and it turned into a stream of light that swept out from the void. It directly crossed over the head of the ordinary young man and directly inserted into a distant mountain peak. The young man's expression did not change, and he only looked at Yi Shiwen as if he did not see that his head was almost cut off by the heavy sword. The heavy sword in his hand had taken away most of the power, but Sunluo Hao's arm was still trembling, and his eyes were full of horror. How could this be? If it could be said that they were evenly matched just now, then now he simply did not have the upper hand at all. Even the heavy sword in his hand was blasted away. How could he dare to say that he had the upper hand? Looking at Yi Shiwen's side, there were only a few white marks on his golden fist, and there was no damage at all. Immediately, everyone burst into an uproar. Using his body to resist a celestial tool, moreover, it was a heaven-grade celestial tool. Even a top-notch expert would not be able to do that. How strong must his body be able to do that? So strong. They all say that I'm a monster, but this is a monster in human skin. Zhu Yi, who was holding the mace, was also dumbfounded. If he were in Yi Shiwen's shoes, he wouldn't have dared to take the attack head-on. Most importantly, Sunluo Hao was also a body cultivator. His physical body was his strongest point. However, he was beaten to a pulp by Yi Shiwen in this domain. Even the heavy sword in his hand was knocked away. One could imagine how shocked they were by Yi Shiwen. Chapter 1506. His face was deathly pale as he retreated for hundreds of meters before stopping. He unloaded the force on his body and panted heavily. His eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. As an expert at the peak of the 5th level of the celestial realm, this was the result of a fight. Although this gap was not as big as the gap between him and a powerhouse at the 7th level of the celestial realm, even so, it could be said to be a huge change. Yi Shiwen shook his hand and looked at Sunluo Hao casually. Although Sunluo Hao was also very powerful, especially his physical body, it also depended on who he was competing with. Competing with Yi Shiwen, who had already stepped into the 10th level of the tyrant body, in terms of physical body, was clearly looking for trouble. What? You still don't plan to come at me together? Yi Shiwen glanced at the others indifferently and finally locked his eyes on the plain-looking young man. His eyes were unusually deep. Damn it, you're courting death. Sunluo Hao saw that Yi Shiwen was indifferent and did not take him seriously at all. He suddenly became furious. Sunluo heavy sword. The heavy sword in the distance instantly flew back to his hand again. It had long been refined by him to the point of telepathy. Even if it flew to another space, he could still find it. He let out a loud roar and slashed out the powerful martial arts of the Sunluo clan. Suddenly, the whole world disappeared as if there was only this heavy sword. Everyone in front of this terrifying power had to tremble in fear. This was a kind of terrifying power that could destroy the world. His pure and terrifying strength was actually able to evolve into this sky. His martial arts were the most fundamental embodiment of a single person's strength to defeat 10. Since you're not willing to come down, then I'll beat you up until you come down. Yi Shiwen sneered and raised his arm. Countless sword chi began to condense and formed into a huge sword. It met the Sunluo heavy sword head-on and slashed down. Boom! The terrifying power collided in the void, causing the entire void to shake crazily. The huge power and the void tore each other apart, and the void was completely distorted. Sunluo Hao suddenly revealed a somewhat pale expression after withstanding this terrifying power. Puff! He spurted out a mouthful of blood and knelt down in the void on the spot. He couldn't even stand up. He was forced to kneel down by Yi Shiwen's attack. It could be seen how terrifying this force was. At this moment, Yi Shiwen took a step forward and chased after Sunluo Hao again. Li Tianlang and the others finally couldn't bear it any longer and shouted, "Stop!" However, how could Yi Shiwen stop now? He took a step forward and instantly rushed in front of Sunluo Hao. Rumble! Even the heavens and earth were shaking. The scene was exceptionally terrifying. Quick! 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 Yi Shiwen's speed was extremely fast. In an instant, he had already arrived in front of Sunluo Hao and suddenly kicked him. Bang! Sunluo Hao, who was severely injured, did not even have time to react before he was kicked away like a meteor. His body split into pieces in the void. It suddenly exploded. It was extremely ferocious. The entire process happened in the blink of an eye. Even Li Tianlang, Ming Tianya, and the others could not react in time. Although they wanted to help, they could not catch up with Yi Shiwen's speed. At this moment, everyone finally understood why Yi Shiwen dared to appear in front of these people. He clearly knew that it might be a trap, but he still appeared in front of them. At first, everyone thought that he was innocent because he didn't know anything. However, when they saw how he easily crushed Sinluo Hao to death, they knew that he had something to rely on. His tyrannical strength was his biggest trump card. Yi Shiwen looked at the remaining people and said coldly, "Are you still not going to make a move?" Arrogant. That was the only thought in everyone's mind. Moreover, it was not just an ordinary kind of arrogance. Was he still planning to challenge these people? Or did he think that these people were not a threat at all? Suddenly, Yi Shiwen discovered that the scene around him seemed as if he had entered the Azura Hell. There was endless slaughter. The blood-red sky extended to the end of his line of sight. And at the end of this region, a huge god of death was directly trampling down from the sky. The huge figure directly shook the heaven and earth. Illusion technique. Yi Shiwen reacted almost immediately. He wasn't Zhu Yi. He had been trapped in the illusion matrix and hadn't realized anything. He had been fooled by someone. Moreover, this scene had become too obvious. So, it would be difficult for him to not realize it even if he didn't want to. He immediately understood that it must be Li Tianlang who made a move. Yi Shiwen, go to hell. That huge killing god's foot had already stepped down. Boom! Yi Shiwen's aura suddenly spread out and swept out. He clenched his 5 fingers into a fist, and the surging golden fist power blasted out in an instant. Boom! After that, the golden fist power blasted on the killing god's foot. However, the shocking thing was that the killing god's foot was not damaged at all. Yi Shiwen's attack seemed to have been completely restrained. Whoosh! Yi Shiwen suddenly stepped down, and his figure directly moved hundreds of meters away, narrowly avoiding the killing god's big foot. Boom! The entire ground was trampled by this killing god, and a huge footprint was left. At this moment, it seemed that only this Azura Hell was left in the world, and no one else could be seen. What kind of lousy illusion is this? Break it for me? Yi Shiwen sneered. Suddenly, the golden divinities on his body crazily gushed out and propped up a golden kingdom. At the same time, the enlightening mind ancient tree in his body instantly swept out 7 colored rays of light and enveloped Yi Shiwen's divine sense. His divine sense suddenly became clear, and he could see through everything in front of him in an instant. What Azura Hell disappeared without a trace in an instant. Although the way of illusion seemed powerful, in the end, it still deceived people's senses. However, if people's senses could not be deceived, then the illusion would become a joke. The more determined a person was, the more powerful a person's mental strength was, the more difficult it was to be deceived. Moreover, Yi Shiwen had the help of the Mingxin ancient tree, and almost instantly saw through this Azura Hell. The world distorted and instantly returned to the previous scene. In the distance, Li Tianlang seemed to be chanting some incantation, and his hands were constantly pinching some hand seals. Suddenly, the moment Yi Shiwen woke up, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, and his complexion was like a tide. He was severely injured in an instant, and he looked at Yi Shiwen in disbelief at this moment. Impossible, my illusion has already reached the peak. Even an opponent of the same level can't see through my illusion so quickly. He couldn't believe it, and he couldn't believe it. At the same time, Yi Shiwen suddenly discovered that Xiao Feibai had already rushed in front of Yi Shiwen unknowingly and stabbed his long sword towards Yi Shiwen. The sword light gushed out a terrifying light and went straight towards Yi Shiwen's face. If Yi Shiwen had reacted a little later, perhaps he would have been decapitated on the spot by Xiao Feibai. At this moment, Yi Shiwen instinctively reacted at this moment, and a powerful golden storm swept out from his body like a huge tornado and protected him in it. Clang! Xiao Feibai's sword pierced into this golden storm, and after piercing half an inch, there was no way to pierce it anymore. What an amazing amount of qi! Many people exclaimed in an instant. They could all see that this golden storm was simply swept out by Yi Shiwen's qi. Ordinary people would also use qi to protect their body, which was also known as the aura shield. However, in any case, there was no such terrifying aura shield. This meant that Yi Shiwen's qi was so vigorous that it was inhuman. At this time, Many people thought that there were several kinds of physiques among the human race's royal physiques that were abnormally vigorous. But when they looked at Yi Shiwen's terrifying physical strength, they immediately overturned their initial thoughts. They probably couldn't imagine that Yi Shiwen had integrated with the Star Beast bloodline. The tyrant body's chi volume was already enormous, not to mention after integrating with the Star Beast, it was more than 10 times or even dozens of times more than ordinary people. In this sky, full of golden whirlwind, Yi Shiwen directly stretched out his big hand and instantly grabbed the long sword that was stabbing towards him. Clang! The long sword was directly grabbed by Yi Shiwen. Crack, crack! Under the watchful eyes of everyone, and under Qiu Feibai's horrified gaze, Yi Shiwen actually grabbed this long sword bit by bit and shattered it inch by inch. This is not ordinary iron, but a heaven-grade magic tool. Oh my god, how strong is his physical body? No matter the outcome of today's battle, Yi Shiwen's name will shake the world, especially his physical body, which is even more ridiculously strong. No, I must go back and check what kind of royal physique he has. It doesn't seem like the Titan body, nor does it seem like the barbarian god's real body, nor does it seem like the other famous physiques. Many people were incomparably horrified, while everyone was still incomparably amazed. Qiu Feibai suddenly stamped his feet, and his figure madly leaped backwards, almost as if he had moved horizontally. While everyone was still very puzzled, a golden fist broke through the vast sky at the place where he had been standing just a moment ago and instantly blasted towards him. It shook the void and almost happened in a flash. He would have been killed by Yi Shiwen's fist if he had reacted a little bit slower. After going through this series of battles, everyone no longer doubted the terrifying strength of Yi Shiwen's fist. If he had been hit on the spot, he would have been seriously injured even if he didn't die. Very fast, huh? Let's see if you can dodge this fist. Yi Shiwen's voice was still reverberating in the void, and his figure had already caught up to Qiu Feibai. Chapter 1507. Yi Shiwen's blood and energy surged up and condensed into a blood pillar that soared into the sky. He looked like a god as he punched. His imposing aura swept out like a violent storm. Qiu Feibai's complexion changed drastically. However, his reaction speed wasn't fast either. He grabbed towards the void, and an iron sword appeared. Endless sword light swept out as he brandished it. It set off a stormy sea and collided with Yi Shiwen's fist. Bang! The fist and the iron sword collided. An endless divine radiance splashed out. The huge sound turned into a whistling sound. It swept out like a tidal wave and transformed into a shockwave. It shattered the vacuum. Many spectating experts retreated one after another. They didn't dare to resist the attack of this shockwave. Crack! An ear-piercing sound of a fracture was mixed with that dreadful, explosive sound. It seemed particularly ear-piercing. A figure flew out from within this terrifying force. He was holding his arm. That iron sword had been shattered into pieces. Only the hilt was left. His arm was hanging down softly, as if it didn't have any bones. Qiu Feibai looked at Yi Shiwen in disbelief. His eyes were full of astonishment. One punch. It was only one punch, and his arm had been crippled. This was more terrifying than he had imagined. His entire arm had been crippled with just one punch. His face was drenched in cold sweat. An intense pain had swept through his entire body. He had almost fainted on the spot. He had experienced countless life and death battles, and had become accustomed to all kinds of injuries. Otherwise, he would have fainted from this attack. One punch, it was only one punch, and his arm had been crippled. This Yi Shiwen was too strong. He was too strong. It was clear who was stronger in this exchange. Yi Shiwen sneered. Tyrant body scripture had reached the 10th layer. It was incomparably tyrannical. Anyone would be thoroughly crushed by him unless their realm was much higher than his. Qiu Feibai retreated again and again. He stamped his feet, and the huge impact made him move horizontally. However, how could Yi Shiwen let him escape? He chased after him again in an instant. Go to hell! Lei Shiwen finally attacked at the same time. He commanded countless thunder dragons to sweep down on the spot. Bang! Dark clouds covered the sky, and countless thunder dragons roared as they rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen's pores opened just as these thunder dragons were about to hit him. Then, countless sword energies gushed out from his body. These sword energies swept out in all directions like fine needles. Boom! 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 These sword energies collided with these thunder dragons, and incomparably terrifying explosions erupted on the spot. The sounds of explosions rose and fell one after another. It seemed as if these explosions would never end. An unimaginable storm swept up in an instant. The astral wind blew and tore the vacuum apart. No one could clearly see what was going on. Several experts with profound cultivation clearly saw that Yi Shiwen's figure had transformed into an electric light amidst the series of explosions. He instantly stepped out and chased after Qiu Feibai. As the saying goes, it's better to break one finger than to injure 10 fingers. So, it was better to eliminate one of them than to injure all of them. This would relieve a lot of pressure on Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen didn't care about these people. However, the mysterious young man who had been watching the battle all along and hadn't made a move was someone that Yi Wen had always been afraid of. This person's cultivation was unfathomable. Even Mingya and the others had no choice but to obey his orders. This was enough to show where the problem lay. Qiu Feibai saw that Yi Shiwen had chased after him once again. He was scared to death. How could he continue to stay at this time? He didn't know where his conviction to kill Yi Shiwen had gone. Now that he thought about it, his previous thoughts had been too ridiculous. He didn't hesitate for a moment and turned around to escape on the spot. However, how could Yi Shiwen let him escape? He directly blasted out a punch. Although it was just a simple punch, it contained supreme power. The terrifying fist pressure shattered the earth, and the entire void was shaking crazily. It seemed as if the world was going to be destroyed by it. Qiu Feibai felt the terrifying coercion behind him getting closer and closer. He quickly turned around and raised his hand to resist. Clang! A metal clanging sound was heard. Yi Shiwen's punch landed on his arm. It was followed by a crack sound. Qiu Feibai's other hand had also been crippled by Yi Shiwen. Ah! Qiu Feibai suddenly screamed. He almost fainted. This terrifying power had engulfed his whole body and made him convulse. Then his whole body was bombarded to the ground like a cannonball. Boom! His hard body smashed into the ground, and a huge crack appeared. It seemed as if his whole body had gone limp. Everyone was dumbfounded as they looked at the scene in front of them. Qiu Feibai's strength couldn't be said to be weak. It was unknown how many experts among the rogue cultivators he had killed in this period of time. However, he seemed so vulnerable in front of Yi Shiwen. He had been completely crushed. No, Qiu Feibai is still very strong. It's a pity that Yi Shiwen is too strong. Qiu Feibai is known to have defeated the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders. However, he isn't any better than the 13 Iron Blood Eagle Riders in front of Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen is so terrifying. I'm afraid the outcome of this battle is hard to predict. Although Yi Shiwen doesn't have the advantage in numbers, his strength isn't the least bit inferior. Yi family actually has such a monstrous genius. I originally thought that among the younger generation of Yi family, the most powerful one should be Yi Su Kong, who is known as the Son of God. I didn't expect that Yi Shiwen alone is already so terrifying. Isn't Yi Su Kong even more powerful? I think so too. Possessing the bloodline of God itself represents a kind of invincibility. Yi Shiwen didn't intend to let Qiu Feibai go. He immediately took a step forward, and his figure disappeared. When he reappeared, he had already appeared in front of Qiu Feibai on the ground. It seemed as if he had teleported. Just as he was about to attack, a bright moon instantly unfolded in the void and crushed down towards Yi Shiwen. Die! At this time, Ming Tianya reacted and made his move. Although his relationship with Qiu Feibai was ordinary, they were like grasshoppers tied to the same rope at this time. If Yi Shiwen defeated them one by one, then he would have no way to escape. At this time, a huge ancient bronze cauldron rose from Yi Shiwen's body and protected him within it. Boom! That bright moon stopped 3 inches away from his body, and a crazy explosion occurred. The terrifying explosion directly caused Yi Shiwen's 8 treasures heaven and earth cauldron to tremble violently. Since the last time it resisted the heaven's retribution, the 8 treasures heaven and earth cauldron didn't undergo any transformation. On the contrary, it had suffered some damage. Otherwise, it wouldn't have started to buzz crazily at this level. At this time, Yi Shiwen also took advantage of this world and punched Qiu Feibai's body on the spot. Bang! Qiu Feibai's sword body was hit by Yi Shiwen's punch on the spot. All the bones in his body were instantly shattered into pieces, and his spirit was directly destroyed. The ground where he was instantly cracked again and directly caved in for hundreds of meters, forming another deep pit. Ha, let's do it together. Yi Shiwen laughed loudly. He looked up to the sky and let out a long roar. His roar shook all directions. Another top heaven's pride expert of the Marquis clan has fallen. Hiss! Is this Yi Shiwen a heaven's pride expert assassin? Everyone was incomparably shocked in their hearts. Just a few years ago, the Yi clan's 5 tyrants were only at the 5th heavenly layer of the sky realm. One could completely understand how shocking it was for them to see a 5th heavenly layer of the sky realm expert fall in front of them. This was similar to the Yi clan's people who had heard that the Yi clan's 5 tyrants had been slaughtered by Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen's cold voice seemed as if he had crawled out from hell. He took a step forward, and the surrounding space was like cotton being trampled by him. Then he suddenly took another step, and the space was trampled apart. Damn! You're too arrogant. Lei Shiwen let out a huge roar. A thunder dragon pierced through the space and instantly appeared on Yi Shiwen's body. Boom! Endless thunder and lightning exploded on Yi Shiwen's body on the spot, and wisps of green smoke rose. However, Yi Shiwen did not move at all, and there was not even the slightest change in his expression. Is that all? The difference is too great, too great. Yi Shiwen laughed loudly. Compared to the heaven's retribution that he had suffered when he crossed the heaven's retribution, this was just a drizzle for someone who had already stepped into the 10th level of the tyrant body. On the side, among the remaining 3 people, Li Tianlang was so depressed that he was about to vomit blood. His strongest point was naturally his superb illusion technique. It was exceptionally easy to deal with any enemy, but this technique was useless in front of Yi Shiwen. The enlightening mind ancient tree could stabilize his mind at any time. Therefore, he wouldn't be affected by these illusions. And he wouldn't be able to launch any fierce attacks against Yi Shiwen without the influence of the illusions. His other martial arts weren't weak. However, there was a huge gap between them and his illusions. So, he could only watch Yi Shiwen wreak havoc, and there was no way he could do anything. Mu Tianbai, are you going to sit back and do nothing? Li Tianlang suddenly shouted. In the face of Yi Shiwen, who directly rushed over, there was no way he could do anything. He did not know why the illusion techniques that he was best at had no effect in front of Yi Shiwen. Useless trash. Mu Tianbai just glanced at Li Tianlang coldly and said. Li Tianlang's face was red, and he looked at Mu Tianbai fiercely, but there was no way at this time. Yi Shiwen looked at Mu Tianbai. Will he make a move? The sword radiance cut open a terrifying huge crack on the ground on the spot, shattering an abyss on the spot. Since you've chosen the path of death, I'll send you to your death. Mu Tianbai's voice was cold and emotionless. If you have any last words, I can help you pass them on to the Yi family. A great sun appeared behind Mu Tianbai and slowly rose, instantly illuminating the entire void. Under this great sun, millions of civilizations were born. Fire was the origin of all things in the world. With fire, there would be all things. This great sun was the only origin of this world. This great sun and Mu Tianbai, you are a member of the Sun King Mu clan. Yi Shiwen muttered, and instantly realized that this was the clan of the Sun King, one of the 4 royal clans of the human race. In the history of the human race, there had been a human emperor in the distant mythological era. After the collapse of the mythological era, the 4 royal clans took turns to rule the imperial court. The other clans were only marquee clans, but they were royal clans because they had once ruled the imperial court and had produced a human king. For the human race, these 4 royal clans were very special existences, just like the 8 royal clans of the devil race. Among the 4 royal clans, the Sun King was the first king of the human race after the mythological era. He led the human race to rise from the ashes of the mythological era and fought in the north and south. He was invincible throughout his life, and no one could rival him. He had established the human race's current territory and foundation. Later on, the Sun King fell under the joint attack of the kings of the other clans. However, he still managed to kill 2 experts of the royal clans before his death. He had countless military exploits and was worshipped by the people. The Mu clan, where the Sun King was from, became the first clan to be crowned as a royal clan. Later on, some almighty experts even said that if the Sun King hadn't fallen, he would have become an Emperor Realm expert and swept away the decline of the desolate times, allowing the human race to dominate the entire world. Yi Shiwen had read this in many secret manuscripts of the Yi family. The ancestors of the Yi family had also followed the Sun King to fight in the north and south. They had made outstanding military exploits and had been conferred the title of a marquis. This was how the Yi family had its current foundation. If you know, then why don't you surrender? Mu Tianbai said in a cold voice. So what if I know? Do you think you're the reincarnation of the Sun King? So what if you're the reincarnation of the Sun King? You can't make me surrender even if the Sun King is here. Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and said, Impudent. Mu Tianbai's ice-cold expression finally changed, and his anger soared to the top. Die! Mu Tianbai roared, and the great sun behind him instantly crushed down towards Yi Shiwen. Today, I will show you what it means to have a strength that you will never be able to challenge. Don't think that you can be arrogant just because you're from the Marquis clan. You're nothing in front of me. The great sun was slowly crushing down, but Yi Shiwen felt that a terrifying power had locked onto him, and he couldn't escape. He immediately unleashed the great sun concept. The great sun was the origin of all living things, but it was also the origin of all destruction. The terrifying sun real fire burned the entire void. Everything was burned to ashes. At this time, Yi Shiwen finally released his aura little by little. He didn't look like a warrior at the second sky of the celestial realm at all. His aura was no worse than Mu Tianbai's. So strong. How can he be so strong? Zhu Yu was also shocked. Although he had overestimated Yi Shiwen, he was still shocked when he saw Yi Shiwen unleash his full power. He was so scared that he almost broke out in cold sweat. In addition to him, many other people felt the same way. Many of them didn't like Yi Shiwen, especially in many people's opinion. If it wasn't for Yi Shiwen, the 10th realm wouldn't have fallen into such a bloody storm. But now that they saw Yi Shiwen's appearance, they all felt that it was a different situation. Fortunately, they didn't look for trouble with Yi Shiwen. Otherwise, they wouldn't even know how they died. This person, how can he be so strong? Mu Tianbai's expression also changed slightly. He originally thought that Yi Shiwen was only at the second sky of the celestial realm. Even if he was tyrannical and had some secret techniques that could compete with the masters at the 5th sky of the celestial realm, it was impossible for him to be compared with Yi Shiwen. He thought that with his strength, he was invincible among the masters at the 5th sky of the celestial realm. But now, Yi Shiwen's sudden eruption was completely beyond his expectations. He was actually so strong. But he was only slightly surprised, and the great sun behind him crushed down even more. Huh! Yi Shiwen shouted, and a huge spirit bomb instantly blasted out. It turned into a long river of energy and swept out. Boom! The terrifying power collided with the great sun. The entire great sun was instantly destroyed by Yi Shiwen's spirit bomb. Countless laws flashed in it and condensed into runes, but it was still destroyed by Yi Shiwen's spirit bomb in an instant. Piercing Cloud's sacred sun sword. Mu Tianbai shouted loudly. His sword pierced through the vast sky the moment Yi Shiwen destroyed the great sun's artistic conception. Then, it bombarded towards Yi Shiwen. This was a big burning sword. Countless flames condensed into the law. It was the law of fire. At this time, it condensed into countless runes, and these runes in turn formed the piercing cloud's sacred sun sword. Piercing cloud's sacred sun sword, the legendary unique technique of the Sun King. The Sun King relied on this set of sword technique to become invincible in the world and dominate the chaotic era after the collapse of the mythological era. But in the Mu clan, even among the many peerless geniuses, only a few people were able to practice this set of sword technique. In the past, only a few people were able to practice this set of sword technique. This Mu Tian Bai actually managed to practice it. I'm afraid his future is boundless. Someone was knowledgeable and recognized it at a glance. That's right, Mu Tian Bai is not old, but his cultivation has already entered the 5th level of the Sky Realm. I'm afraid his status in the Mu clan is not low. In the future, he may have the opportunity to compete for the position of the Human King. This Yi Shiwen is not ordinary. He is only at the 2nd level of the Sky Realm, but he is already so amazing. I'm afraid that his talent is not inferior to that of the God's Child. The Yi clan must be nurturing him like a treasure. No matter what, whether it is the Royal Clan or the Marquis Clan, they are giants that we can't match. In the face of this sword that was condensed from countless law of fire, Yi Shiwen let out a long roar and directly blasted a punch. The golden fist energy directly overflowed and fiercely bombarded the sword on the spot. Boom! The countless law of fire was blasted by Yi Shiwen on the spot and turned into a group of sparks in the sky. However, at that moment, Zhu Yi let out a loud roar. Be careful! Just as this magic sword was blown up, another sword light streaked across the sky and swept out in front of Yi Shiwen in an instant. It went straight towards Yi Shiwen's face at an unimaginable speed. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.